Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. That's right, this is No Soundbites Allowed. I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I hope you can see us a little bit better today. We've got a couple of things going on with the technology, the equipment we've tried to improve. We hope you enjoy that. If this is the first time that you are joining us, welcome. We thank you for joining us. Every week at Sunday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we reach out on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, DLive, basically all the social media that the internet overlords will allow, and they don't always, to speak with you from anywhere in the world to express your First Amendment right. That's right, your right to free speech. Even in countries that don't believe in that, if you can see this channel, then you have free speech, and we want you to share it with us. You can reach us with your text, your chats, and even calling to the program at 607-242-1582. We are going to be going over there's some breaking news that has just come out with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We're going to be speaking about that. We're going to be addressing some of the issues that are going on around the world, from Afghanistan, Iran, the United States especially. We're going to be talking about a lot of things. Most importantly, we're going to be hearing from you. And one of the first people speaking here, Mike Bowie, thank you for joining us, Michael. And he mentions he just finished mowing his lawn. Folks, it is always wonderful for you to be here with us, whether you are just listening in the background or if you're actively being involved like Michael is, sending in your text, your comments, or calling in 607-242-1582. Our phone is on and live. So let's get into this a little bit. What's happening here? We have a problem in the world. Now, like we said in the intro, the title, you can see this is about the Tetris effect. Now, I want to explain what I mean by that and how I got to it. So let me explain. You may recall it was back 2 days ago, a day ago. David Webb, a great guy. I've met him a couple of times at CPAC. I've been there in 2019 and a couple of other years. And I was talking about 2020 as well. And I spoke with David Webb. But he came out with this tweet that, quote, every statue and street building has been renamed. Every date has been altered. And the process is continuing day by day and minute by minute. History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right. This is a quote from George Orwell's book, 1984. And it's incredibly accurate to what we've been seeing in modern politics. This has been accurate to what we've been seeing for more than a decade now. And it made me think, because when I thought of that, I also thought of something else that came out in 1984. And you may remember it. It's Tetris. Remember that game Tetris? I think we've all seen it. The blocks start falling down. You have to put them together so it eliminates each level. And then, and as the blocks build up, if it reaches all the way to the top, you lose the game. Now, this was from Wired magazine out of the UK. And they said, and this is from 2013. This article is This AI Solves Super Mario Brothers and Other Classic Games, but more importantly, it's from back on December 4th of 2013. And in that, they said, in Tetris, though the method fails completely, they're talking about the AI, it seeks out the easiest path to a higher score, which is laying bricks on top of one another randomly. Then, when the screen fills up, the AI pauses the game. As soon as it unpauses, it'll lose. The only way to win the game is not to play. And I'll tell you what, I see that as being exactly what we're seeing in the Biden administration. This is the progressive socialist mandate right now. And this is how we're seeing policy, both domestic and international, is going on in the United States. It's this oppressive view, as seen from 1984, the book by George Orwell, as being seen by what we're seeing now with this Tetris game that's going on with our government. Let me take a moment. On DLive, I see Jason is mentioning David Webb had an epic moment when he was told he was white. I remember that, and I was speaking with David about that, He may not recall as well as I do. He's a lot larger, of course, of a figure than I am. But we had spoken about that. It was quite a unique moment. And Dal mentions, did you wind up being suspended from YouTube again? No. They only suspended me for the 1 week so far. We will see what's going to happen going forward. But we will see exactly whether or not they're going to allow us to continue. And that's why it's so important, folks, for you to speak up, to leave your comments, to call into the show, to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content that we are providing, because they are trying to silence it. We are seeing the internet overlords consistently trying to remove stuff. We were shut down for a week. We've had a couple of our videos removed out of 1,200 videos that we've been doing for a decade. Suddenly, when we mentioned what's going on in this nation, when we quoted the Hawaii Tribune and the AP News, then suddenly we got shut down. We got removed, and we were suspended for a week. Why? Because the internet overlords don't want you to think. They don't want you to speak. They don't want your voice. They want you to comply. This is very much like what David Webb was talking about when he brought up 1984. This is straight out of 1984. Everything is being changed, and it's a process. We're constantly seeing things being redefined. When we talk about critical race theory, everything in America, if you look at critical race theory, which is being exported out across the world into France, where it's being opposed, in the United Kingdom, where it's being opposed, we're seeing this idea that everything is racist. Everything refers back to racism, and everything is racist unless you do exactly what the progressive socialists deem to be correct. And that changes day by day. How many times have we seen a progressive, a socialist come out and they make a statement, and then we see a comment that they made 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 10 years ago. Suddenly, that no longer applies. That's the wrong thing that they said. They're suddenly being canceled because of what they said before, but aren't they part of that progressive movement? Aren't they the leaders? No, because there is no such thing. You think that you're part of their group until they say, oh, you're no longer part of the group and you have to be punished just like anyone else. The rules constantly change. This is directly 1984. Tim, hello, Tim. It's good to see you. I see you're, I don't think you've been on the channel before. We're glad to have you here. Tim mentions you're a great person. Keep up the good works. Thank you for the compliment. We do our best here. Dee is with us today. Hello, Dee. It's good to see you as well. Remember, folks, you can add your comments too. And by the way, we, unlike YouTube, unlike the internet overlords, we don't require you to have the same view as we do. I'm a conservative Republican. You don't have to be. We are open and welcoming to everyone here. Just be respectful. You don't have to agree with us. You can completely disagree with anything I'm speaking about, but just be respectful. That's all we're saying. Thank you, Tim, for sharing this. That is always important to get more people involved. And again, everyone is welcome to say whatever they want. Now, as I was mentioning, this is about Tetris. We're seeing the overlords of the internet. We're watching politicians try and control the way people are thinking and what they're talking about. We're watching this, and I compare it to Tetris because we seem to be in the middle of this pause. As was mentioned in the article from Wired in 2013, the only way to win this game for progressives and socialists is they have the game on pause. They have been building everything up, and now they've paused it so that you can't advance anything. Nothing can go forward. Now, let me try and explain what I'm talking about here. I mean, the easiest example is the national debt. If you look at the United States national debt, $28.6 trillion at this moment. There's another roughly $6 trillion that is looking to be added near term. There is constantly a current debate about the infrastructure bill, $1.2 trillion. Another $3.5 trillion is going to be added right after that as part of the America First, I think that's what he's calling it, the Biden administration's plans for social justice in the United States. So we're looking at trillions. We're looking at literally half of all the debt that has been accumulated in the history of the United States is going to be added onto, another half is going to be added on in 7 months, is going to be added to the United States deficit. I don't care who you are, unless you're Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Andrew Yang, everyone else understands that if you add that much debt in that little time, it's going to have an impact. It is going to destroy the system. Economically, it's going to destroy the system that you're putting that into. That is just too much debt. To give you some perspective on that, the Obama administration in 8 years doubled the national debt. It was about $10 trillion, which is huge, by the time that President Obama took over. When he ended his term, we were at $20 trillion. That is a lot of money. There is no question about that. We spent insane amounts of money, and one president doubled all the debt previous to him. We're looking at Joe Biden doubling it, adding on the same amount of debt as the Obama administration did in 8 years. The Biden administration is looking to do in 8 months. Can you imagine that? I mean, think of it in your personal life. Could you imagine that if you had your debt, the average person in America owes something like $8,000 in debt. Imagine adding $4,000 in debt into your life. Think about what your creditors are going to do. If you added $4,000 of debt to the debt you have right now, which would put you at $12,000 in debt if you're the average person, then imagine credit cards would be cut. You wouldn't be able to buy anything. Oh, the screen has been frozen. I'm not sure why that's the case. Why? Oh, there we go. Okay, we're back. Don't know why everything froze for a second there. But imagine that. You've got $12,000 in debt suddenly, overnight. Boom. Dow mentions the mint goes and prints more money. That is what Andrew Yang and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have said over the last several years. They've been saying, well, you can just print more money. No one will ever question it. No one's ever going to call it. Just print more money. Except that's not how it works. Because when you just print more money, and to make it clear for everyone, it's not just that you're getting more debt and therefore no one's going to let you buy things anymore. It's more important than that. Every time you're adding this in, when you're just printing out money, the money you have is worth less. It decreases the value. It devalues your money, which means it takes more money to buy things, which is inflationary. The greatest example of this in history is called the Weimar Republic. This was right after World War I. And Germany was because of the negotiations for World War I, the peace treaties that were made, the incredible inflation that was put into Germany, where in the morning, it would take a wheelbarrow filled with money would be needed to buy a loaf of bread. By that afternoon, you would need 2 wheelbarrows full of money because they were constantly printing more money. And it was just, the money was worthless. As soon as they could print it, it was devalued. And therefore, it was worth less. That is exactly what's going on here in the United States. And the problem, and the thing that's helping the United States is we are the strongest nation in the world. And since we lead the world and the dollar is being used as the currency of the world, that helps to offset the fact that we are just printing money at a rate that is historically unprecedented. Hello, Bojo. Bojo mentions, first, Mike Bowie mentions people going bankrupt sometimes max out their credit cards. Exactly. And they max them out trying to keep themselves afloat, but you can't, because the interest will eventually catch up, because someone will eventually say, I don't want to give you more money, you have too much debt. And then once that happens, all the dominoes fall one after the other, and the entire thing collapses. So you're right, Michael. Bojo, hello Bojo, mentions, do you remember with Trump we had secure borders, now we got thousands of illegals coming and many with a virus walking our streets, drugs flowing in freely. We were oil independent, now we're buying. there have been a lot of changes, and a lot of that has to do with what we're seeing from the Biden administration, like I'm talking about with infrastructure. And that's why I'm saying this is like Tetris. We've been building this up. Suddenly, in 8 months, Biden administration, duplicating what was done by the Obama administration, has just been building up things, one on top of the other. We're going to add another $1 trillion. Then we're going to add $3.5 trillion. We're going to double down on the Green New Deal, which just doesn't work. We're going to cut off, we're going to run away from everything we're doing internationally, or we're going to abandon our allies. Again, we're building this tower of instability, and we're pausing the game saying, oh, but now we can't do anything. And if you try and change that, if you try and change what we've done, opening up the border, allowing legal aliens in with COVID, if you try and stop that, well, then we would lose the game, because they wouldn't be able to advance the progressive and socialist ideology any further. They wouldn't be able to change the system. And again, at the end of the day, progressives and socialists want to change America. They don't want the Constitution. They want to have human rights, not inalienable rights. They want to determine what you're going to do. They want to micromanage your life. That requires them to change everything. And if this tower of instability continues, well, these neo-nobles will lose, because the American people will regain their power, will change the system and say, no, this doesn't work. And the tower of progressivism falls apart the moment people say, I am an individual, I am an American, I have rights, I have freedoms, and I control the government, because the government only has power that I allow it to have. And once you do that, their tower falls apart. They lose the game. So this is why it's like Tetris. They've paused the game just before they can lose. They're silencing you. They're stopping you and me to speak. I mean, look at the hundreds of thousands of people who have been removed from Twitter and continue to be removed from Twitter, from Facebook, from YouTube. The number of people who are being silenced as Democrats in Congress are saying, hey, we need more of the censorship. We need to censor more people for more ideas that they could possibly have. Because the moment people start talking with each other and realize, no, we're not just a check mark. You're not just a male. You're not just a female. You're not just whatever sexual preference you may have. When you start saying, I'm more than just the color of skin that I was born with, once you say that, their entire Tetris model falls apart. They lose the game, and now we're into a new system. So that's why I call this the Tetris administration. That's why I'm calling this, that's why I want to call it the Tetris administration going forward. I mean, does that make sense, folks? And again, if you disagree, if you think we've misunderstood something, please let us know. We want to have this conversation. That's the point. Now, Jason mentions that wait until they increase interest rates, and that is coming. We said back in February of 2021, we have it laid out. We've detailed it since December to February, how the U.S. economy is failing. And in the second half, we expect it to fail with double-digit inflation. And as we have been seeing coming out in the news from Wall Street and the various economic newspapers and media, they seem to be indicating that same kind of growth. Although they're saying it's going to top out at 9%. Of interest, of inflation, I think it's going to hit double digits. And I think I've made that case pretty clear, which doesn't look good for you and me. And remember, there's 20% of the nation of homeowners with mortgages that are variable. And when that interest rates start climbing up, we get to see another version of 2008 and that housing crash. That's on top of the problems we already have with the eviction crisis, which we're going to get into in a moment. Dow mentions that the visual quality difference between YouTube and DLive is quite different. DLive is superior. Well, that's good. That's one of the reasons why I want to be on there. I try and give people as many ways to reach this program as possible. Dow mentions, I really, really despise micromanagement. I think everyone in the world despises micromanagement. And it's a telltale sign of totalitarian governments, especially in socialism. Every socialist country that has ever existed and exists at this moment and will exist in the future are all totalitarian. All of them, every single one. And I don't care what you believe about socialism, don't care what you think about communism. If you're trying to deny the totalitarian aspect, you cannot. It is intrinsic in it, and we see that. That's the only way they work, is that they have to micromanage everyone's life, and they have to dictate what you're going to do. Look at the social credit rating in China. Look at how they oppress the Uyghurs, people who have religion and religious views, how they make the city council in Hong Kong an independent city state, how they disappear the members of the council because they want to have a glimpse of the American freedom that they see on TV, that they've heard about, just by glimpsing at it, get removed. Dow mentions that when the middle managers gain power, the office is on steroids. That's what we're seeing, and I agree with that. Now, I want to get into a couple of things here very quickly, and I want to give you an example of how far we have gone, how crazy this system is at this moment. You probably haven't heard about this. On August 7th, yesterday, okay, at 4 p.m., this came out. The University of Wisconsin-Madison removes 2 billion-year-old rock because of racism. Did you hear about that? I don't know if a lot of people heard about this. This is crazy. And this is the key thing. This is from the Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, Lori Ressler, from the university, and she says, in the midst of demands for justice following George Floyd's murder last summer, the students wanted change on campus, and they worked hard to see this through. While the decision required compromise, I'm proud of the student leaders and the collaboration it took to get here. Where did they get to at the University of Wisconsin-Madison? They removed a rock. Think about this. This is how crazy this is. This is how far they have piled this insanity up. Kids, these students are fighting to get rid of a rock because the rock is a symbol of racism. Can you imagine that? A rock. We're not talking about a person. We're not talking about a statue. It's not a monument. We're not talking about something that was crafted by human beings. This is a rock. Someone found a rock like you would find in a quarry, like you find when you're going out and hiking, a rock. They picked it up. They brought it to this university. It's a 2 billion-year-old rock, and it's racist. So racism is 2 billion years old. Does that make any sense to you? Does that sound like you have, by removing this rock, the University of Wisconsin-Madison has ended racism? Does that sound appropriate to you? This is what they were fighting for. Because of George Floyd, a career criminal and addict, because he died, and yes, it's sad that anyone dies inappropriately because of his own stupidity and the actions of an officer going too far. We admit that. That is what was found in the trial, whatever you may think of the trial. But because of this man dying, they decided we have to fight racism. That means getting rid of a rock. Now, I do want to give you some more context here. Yes, and Jason's correct. It did cost $70,000 to pick up this 2 billion-year-old rock and move it. It's not being destroyed, by the way. The rock isn't being destroyed. It's just being moved to somewhere else. But here's the thing, and I like Dal. I'm going to get to your comment in a second. I want you to understand. They're getting rid of the rock because in 1925, almost 100 years ago, somebody said there was a negative racist connotation that someone used in reference to The Rock. By the way, we don't even know what it is. No articles actually mention what the negative racial statement is. They don't mention what The Rock was called. Doesn't really matter. But when in 1925, almost 100 years ago, when someone said something, today, now that is a symbol of racism, and that means we have to get rid of it. Because someone once called a rock something racist, well, today we fight oppression and racism by getting rid of the rock. Are you kidding me? That's the best thing that they could do to fight racism. That's the symbol of oppression that they see is a rock. And by the way, if you think I'm wrong, if you think this isn't appropriate, if you think this is misunderstanding this, please, you are free to call into the show, to send me a text, a chat. That's what this show is about. Please tell me why I'm wrong, why a rock that is 2 billion years old is racist. Please, I really want to have that conversation. I really, really want to understand that. Because what you're really upset, because what seems to really be upsetting these students is that someone in 1925 made a racist comment. Now, if you're upset about the comment in 1925, fantastic. If you're upset about the rock, you have a problem because you don't understand what you're talking about at that point. The rock has nothing to do with the comment. The comment, it may be a problem. The rock is meaningless. You can call the rock anything you want. You can call it Plymouth Rock for all I care. It doesn't make a difference because the rock is still just a rock. And matter of fact, as Dal Grimm mentioned, so Star Wars is racist now for its insensitive casting of Geode. For those who don't know, Star Wars created this new thing called the High Republic, a bunch of stories from Disney that no one likes. And one of the characters is a navigator who is a rock. Now, let me be clear. This isn't like in 4, where you have that one character who walks around, he talks, hey, how you doing? I'm Korg. That's his name. I'm Korg. I'm a rock. No. This is a rock. Just a slab of rock that has no arms, no legs, no mouth. It has a sexuality because it has kids. God only knows how a rock could possibly reproduce. And who knows how it communicates, but it's a rock that is in charge of navigation on the vessel. That's the actual name of the spaceship in Star Wars. See, it's the same idea. This is idiocy. And perhaps that rock from Star Wars is the same as this rock. It could be that same rock, 2 billion years old. And suddenly it's someone projecting. It's the progressives and socialists projecting here, trying to make it sound like, and again, like David Webb highlighted from 1984, rewriting history to match their political agenda. That's it. That's the only reason why we're seeing a rock be removed. It's not because the rock is 2 billion years old. It's not because racism is 2 billion years old. It's because they are projecting their belief of history onto you. They are projecting that everything must be seen in this ideology of racism. And if you don't accept that, you are the problem, not the fact that the rock isn't a problem, not because of them removing the rock. No, it's your problem because you don't see the racism inherent in the rock existing. Because you don't see the racism of 100 years ago that the rock embodies. Not the comment by the person in 1925 in the newspaper. No, it's the rock itself, which is, I believe, blatantly stupid. Jason Dow says, it fits. They say that racism is intrinsic to the world. So what is more foundational than a rock on which we live? Jason mentions that that shows you the power that these radical progressives have over our system. Mike Bowie mentions, so if I call Biden a bad word, they'll remove him. I wish it were that simple. Dow mentions that ask farmers in Pennsylvania and New York. They swear every time they till dirt, the rock seems to reproduce. Yeah, they do. But that time tells you something. Tim mentions, can I clip your show? Sure, absolutely. You can tip. You can use content from this. This is out to the public. Just, give it credit. Credit the clip that you're making. And please keep it in context. But otherwise, use it all you want. I'll be happy to come on to your show and to add any context or answer any questions. Because this is about discussion and I have no problem with defending my views. Now, and yes, how are they paying for the $70,000? They've got independent investors to come in and pay for it. So here's the thing. That's just one of the problems. And again, this is showing you how fragile this tower of progressivism is. That they have to change rocks, that they have to change history going back 2 billion years because they have to impress upon you everything is racist, down to inanimate objects that have existed longer than mankind has, longer than human beings have. That's the only way that they can make their system work. And they have to put everything on pause. You can't question that because if you do, then their system, they lose. So you can't talk about it negatively. And that's why you probably didn't see this article being covered by the major news media. Because they don't want you to suddenly have the question that I think every human being naturally would have is, how can a rock be racist? That's not how it works. So that's one of the things they want to turn on its head. Another thing you probably didn't hear a lot about that I want to address here is, and this comes from Hot Air, my good friend Jazz Shaw works there. I want to give a shout out to him. This is one of his colleagues, John Sexton, who on August 2nd noted that Portland wants to walk back defunding the police, but officers don't want the job. What a shocking bit of news. Quoting the article, after the GVRT, which is, and that is the Gun Violence Reduction Team of Portland, it's a specialized police unit. After the GVRT was cut, the number of shootings and murders in Portland skyrocketed. Last September, there were 110 shootings in Portland, a 243% jump compared to a year earlier, 2019. At the end of the year, 2020, Portland had more than 900 shootings, double the previous year. In other words, Portland became Chicago, even as Chicago became worse. Now, I point this out for you. You probably didn't hear about this article. You probably didn't hear about the fact that Portland, one of the most progressive cities in the entire country, a city that was absolutely all about the autonomous zones and the BLM and Antifa riots. They were rioting in Portland for 120 days at least in a row. Even as Democrats had said, nope, doesn't exist. This isn't happening. No, there's nothing wrong going on. We saw that the riots in Portland led to that was in Seattle, where a man was killed. But although there were separate deaths in Portland, directly because of the rioting, not peaceful protests. If they were peaceful protests, I can tell you, there wouldn't be 900 shootings in Portland. It just wouldn't be the case. They didn't have 900 shootings because it was peaceful protesting. That's not true. So, again, we see this scenario where they've been telling us. We heard Cori Bush, Anna Presley, AOC, Ted Wheeler, the mayor of Portland. We've seen these mayors come out and say, well, we have to defund the police. Lori Lightfoot out of Chicago and so many others, the DC mayor. They keep telling us we have to defund the police. The progressive socialist movement is saying we have to get rid of the police because the police are bad guys universally. And as soon as they get rid of these, quote, bad guys, suddenly we see what happens? Shootings are astronomically increasing. And I would call a 243% increase in shootings, that's astronomical increases. In fact, all 22 cities that led the autonomous zones, led the defunding of police, in every single one of them, we have seen a remarkable, if not astronomical, increase in the number of gun violence and violence overall and crime overall, especially shootings and homicides. We've just seen that. And now they're turning around and in each and every one of these cities, Minneapolis, Seattle, Portland, Austin, New York City, in each of these places, we are seeing that after they've done this and they've seen the result, which is incredible increases in crime, they're suddenly turning around with the public telling them, we want the police back. We want to get back to law and order, which gets significantly less news than what was given by the major news media to the defunding. The news media was all about defunding and was more than happy to tell everyone that we're defunding these cities because of racism. And they don't want to tell you, oh, by the way, now the public is saying, oh my God, bring back the police. Blacks, 70% of blacks, according to polling, are saying, bring back the police because I want safety. Because what you've done is you've released the criminals onto us. Again, this is that progressive Tetris model. They just piled on racism, racism, racism. Pause. You can't talk about the result of their efforts to impress upon you and convince you that racism exists everywhere. That racism exists in every form of the government. Every police officer is a racist person. This is what the progressives say. And then what do we see? The violence is going skyrocketing. Criminals are taking advantage of the fact that there are fewer police. They're taking advantage of the fact that it takes longer for a police officer to respond to each and every event. Oh, that we can't talk about. That the major news media is generally avoiding. They don't want to go into the consequences of what is being pushed to you in trying to rewrite the history of police officers. Police officers, according to the progressives, you've seen this before. You've heard, I think it was Anna Presley or Cori Bush who mentioned that police officers are just members. They were created to catch slaves and return them into slavery when they escaped from the South, which is a blatant lie and rewriting of history. Police existed in England long before the United States existed. Like many things in our government, we took ideas and the legal system of England and brought it to America, and while we tweaked it and made it more free, it's essentially the same system. And there were sheriffs, there were police that existed in England long before America existed. I mean, where do you think you get Robin Hood from? The Sheriff of Nottingham. He wasn't running around trying to get slaves. No, the Sheriff of Nottingham, while not a good man in that story, was existing, and he was enforcing laws that existed in England. To say that the only reason why we have police in the United States is to return slaves is an ignorant statement and meant to rewrite history to again make you think that a rock is racist. That's what they're doing. To make you think that getting rid of these police is going to make you safer and be less racist. More important than trying to make things less dangerous, they want them to be less racist. And in doing that, they're more than happy to have more crime. Let's see. Jason mentioned that the only way to get police is from federal police forces. And I'm going to mention that in a second. Mike Bowie mentions first they create the problem, then promote big government as the solution, a nationalized police force, or Capitol Police who are controlled by who, which Jason mentions. Well, if you may remember, folks, last week on this very same live stream, we identified and we put out there that they are nationalizing police. See, the police are bad unless they are controlled by the left, by the progressives, which is why Nancy Pelosi is trying to increase the power of the U.S. Capitol Police. As we described last week, they are looking to open up offices for the U.S. Capitol Police in every state, 50 divisions of the Capitol Police, to investigate problems and threats to Congress. Guess what? We already have someone who does that. We already have a law enforcement agency that does that. You know what it's called? The FBI. You know who else we have? The U.S. Treasury, which has the Secret Service. We actually have several agencies. How about the U.S. Marshals? They all exist to do what Nancy Pelosi wants the Capitol Police to do. And here's the problem. Who do the U.S. Capitol Police answer to? Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, the leaders of the House of Representatives and the Senate. They don't answer to the normal legal law enforcement system. On top of which, and here's the thing that most people don't know, as we identified last week, there is no FOIA, which is Freedom of Information Act. See, I can go right now, you can go right now, and you can ask the CIA questions. You can ask them to explain what they are doing as a spy agency around the world. You can ask the United States military, what are they doing in Iraq? How many drones are they using? How many times have they fired missiles? What are the collateral damage estimates? You can do that. You can have that conversation. You can ask any part of the federal government how they are spending money. You cannot ask the Capitol Police anything. There is no FOIA. They are outside that chain. You have no oversight on them. Nancy Pelosi has the oversight. She can make that definition. She's the only one. Again, what are we seeing? There's this tower. It's this tower of instability, increasing the power of progressives and socialists by creating this new, some would call it a secret police agency. I will call it a secret police agency, a group of individuals who are out there doing the bidding of members of Congress with no accountability to the United States public in a duplication of agencies we already have already doing the job. So that makes me question, what are the U.S. Capitol Police supposed to be doing? We already have the agencies to take care of this. But what they are doing is we need to introduce this as we are getting rid of your regular local police. Even though Ted Wheeler is admitting that when they do that, there's more crime. So you can't be protected from the police. You also can't protect yourself with the Second Amendment, according to the progressives. But they can add in a new legal agency, which they think are great. Police are all, under the progressive socialist mentality, all police are racist and evil, except when they create the U.S. Capitol Police, when they create an agency and expand it across the nation to do something you can't even question. Tell me, does anyone get scared by that? Is anyone terrified of that? And again, if you think I am wrong, if you think I have misunderstood this information, if you think I am presenting you information incorrectly, you have the right, please. I think it's an obligation. Contact us. You can reach us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, DLive. You can send us a phone call. You can call us at 607-242-1582 and say, Mike, you have just misunderstood that. Let me explain. Please, please explain, because Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer will not explain what the U.S. police are supposed to do, that the FBI, the U.S. Marshals, your local police forces, what they can't do or what they're not doing. Please, they won't explain this. They won't explain why the U.S. Capitol Police do not have the ability to have public oversight, which means you and me being able to say, I want to have a Freedom of Information Act explaining what you, the Capitol Police, are doing in North Dakota that the FBI can't do, that the U.S. Marshals can't do, that the local police can't do. Please explain this. And by the way, tell me, how much of the U.S. taxpayer money are you spending to do this mysterious mission that comes from, ultimately, Nancy Pelosi? And by the way, I wouldn't like it anymore if this was being done by a Republican. I don't care which Republican you pick. I don't care if it's Ted Cruz or anyone else, Tom Cotton. You name them. I don't care who it is. I don't want any member of Congress to have their own private, essentially their own private secret police force in the United States, going around doing God only knows what and claiming, well, that's to protect the nation. It's to protect Congress. We have people to do that. On top of the fact that we have the U.S. Capitol protected, on top of, and by the way, and many people don't know this, in Washington, D.C., there are 35 different agencies of law enforcement in Washington, D.C. itself, each of them with various levels of police forces or law enforcement agents in that area. There are thousands, actually tens of thousands of law enforcement agents in Washington, D.C. at any given moment. That's including the U.S. Capitol Police. It's one of the most protected places in the world. And since 1812, no one has really tried to do anything in Washington, D.C. 1812, the War of 1812, it's more than just a classical piece of music. The White House was burned down. Washington was attacked. It was razed by the British, no less. But that was in 1812. It's 2021. Unless you think someone's walking in a personal nuke, which, worry about North Korea later, but we'll talk about that. But there's no reason for this. None whatsoever. So there's a couple of comments on this. Dow mentions that these cities with rising crime rates defund the police for the public, but increase funding for private security for their leadership, like with Cori Bush, who has admitted that she spent $70,000 for her private security as she told the people of Minnesota, you don't need any police. We're getting rid of the police. We're going to defund the police. She was happy about that. Meanwhile, how much did crime go up in Minneapolis? Minneapolis at the George Floyd Square Autonomous Zone, which is a treasonous zone. Autonomous zones are treasonous by definition and by their actions. This is in April of 2021. That was the same exact place that she was so happy that police were not allowed into this autonomous zone. Because they were getting rid of the police, there was a national news crew doing a live segment as a drive-by shooting happened a block away from them in camera view. But you know what? Cori Bush wasn't worried because she had a private police force to protect her. She was okay. She was protected. Her constituents, well, they might have been shot by a drive-by on national TV. That's kind of scary. And again, if their overwatch of YouTube, if you have a question about this, I have already shown the sources of this as I've covered this story weeks ago, and I'll be happy to show it to you again. It is a national news event. It happened. So you may not like what I think about it, but it's a fact. It happened. Dow goes on to say that at the same time, they cry for more control to limit the citizenry to defend themselves and gun control. That's right. You don't get to have a firearm to protect yourself. They go so far as in New York State, they are trying to ban the use of bulletproof vests because, being able to passively defend yourself is a danger to you and everyone else. Somehow. Don't know. There's absolutely no offense unless I'm picking up a bulletproof vest and swing it around like a baseball bat. There is no way that it has an offensive capability. It's there to passively defend you. And in New York State, Bill A416, as I recall, and I've covered on this program before, is there to take away your right to defend yourself. Forget having a gun. You can't even have a bulletproof vest for you or your family. Meanwhile, members of Congress, like Cori Bush and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, they get to have a police force protecting them, private security and public security. That's terrifying. It's upsetting. And it gets worse. But let me go on before I say that. Dow mentions that so Pelosi and Schumer are creating the National Democratic People's Police of Harmony, Love, and Peace. How very China's communist government of them. Mike Bowie mentioned, so if Biden and Harris are found to be incompetent or illegitimate, what's to stop Pelosi from seizing control or any member of Congress? I want to be very expansive here. I have a problem with the Capitol Police being expanded to all 50 states, not just because, definitely and absolutely because I don't trust Nancy Pelosi nor Chuck Schumer. For many, many good reasons. But at the same time, I wouldn't trust a Republican or a Libertarian or a conservative or anyone with that power. No one in the United States should be empowered to be able to have a secret police force paid for by taxpayer dollars or even privately, but in this case, taxpayer dollars. No one should have that power. That should not exist in our nation. We've already gone as far as we need to with that, in the fact that we have a FBI as well as a CIA. We don't need another organization running around trying to find enemies of the state because someone in political power thinks I'm going to get reelected and I just need to silence all the people that I don't like. I don't care who it is. So what's to stop this from saying, oh, well, we're going to, you could see this, and maybe it's conspiratorial, but you could see the U.S. Capitol Police creating the opportunity for someone to try, and at some point, someone will, because power corrupts and ultimate power corrupts ultimately. Someone who has the power of the secret police across the nation at some point might try to take over the government. And I don't mean gather a bunch of people who are going to go and break and enter and say, we are upset with the government and how it's being run, as in January 6th. No, I'm talking about some kind of riots and takeover like we saw in the Capitol Hill, what was it? Autonomous Zone, the Chaz in Seattle, and the attempted autonomous zones down in Atlanta that killed an 8-year-old child. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the riots that we've heard MSNBC tell us are perfectly peaceful. Don't mind the building that is burning behind us because of an arson. No, that was mostly peaceful, and it just spontaneously burst into fire for no reason at all. Don't mind the people rioting on camera. No, this is all pretty peaceful. It's pretty calm. They're lying to your face, folks. They had built up this huge tower of instability called progressivism and socialism. And they're telling you to your face, don't believe it. Don't worry about it. It's all good. It's all fine. It's all going to work out perfectly because we are going to get it right. That's all right. Don't worry about that. Wizard of Oz, don't look behind the curtain. Don't pay attention to what's happening there. Not important. We're going to take care of you, you peasant. It's very upsetting. And I'll give you another example of how we're seeing this being put together. Why they have built up this tower and why it's paused. Why we see the internet overlords. Why we see the major news media silencing you. They don't want you to talk. They don't want you to have this conversation. That's what this show exists for, to have a conversation. They don't want you to have it. And let me explain another example of what they're doing and why. I want you to see this because you may have seen this, but I want to be very clear. In Florida, there are 23,903 new cases of the pandemic. There have been 13,348 hospitalizations with 93 deaths. I want you to understand that. Now, you may look at the number and go, oh my God, that's terrifying. That's horrendous. 23,000 new cases of the pandemic. There's been 2.7 million people who have been affected by the pandemic. These are horrible, horrible numbers. Oh my God, this is terrifying. Stop for a second. Stop with the fear. Stop being afraid. I want you to think about something. There have been 39,695 deaths. 93 people recently died. 93 people out of 20, let's round it off, 24,000 people recently caught the pandemic. 93 of them died. Let's call it 100. 24,000 got the pandemic. 100 people died. Did you do the math on that? I mean, just do the math on that for a second. I know people hate to do math. They hate to do math. And you're looking at just really big numbers and it's just really terrifying. Oh my God. Except it's half a percent. The number of people dying from the pandemic, going by those numbers, and if we assume that they are consistent, and they have been, you're looking at less danger than what we saw last year. It is less deadly. Yes, more people caught this, the Delta of the pandemic. More people are getting it because it's more contagious. Less people are dying. And that's the part in the news you really don't see emphasized, which you would think would be something to emphasize. You're not going to die. We said that in 2020, in February of 2020. We say that today. You might get it. You're probably not going to die. 99% of the people, 97 to 99% of the people are not going to die. If you are old, like 70, and you have pre-existing conditions, usually 2 of them, then you might be at risk. That is a target group that is at risk. Not of catching it, but of dying. Anyone can catch it, including people who have been vaccinated. Whether or not you have a vaccination has nothing to do, or very little to do, with the fact that you could get this. That doesn't mean you're going to die. But if you notice, all the news media is putting this out as if it is a death sentence. Now, I am not telling you to get a vaccine or not to get a vaccine. I am not telling you whether or not you should wear a mask. That is up to you. And I know YouTube censors will want to try and attack me on this, but I'm being very clear. I'm not telling you what to do. I am not telling you whether it's good or bad, and I will not tell you that. What I am telling you is what the numbers are showing you. And the numbers are showing a 0.5%. That is a fact. It is reported by the news. So when YouTube's fact checkers want to come back to this, I want them to be very clear. I didn't say anything other than what the news did. I just put it in a percentage. So that people, instead of looking at big numbers and being scared, I'm saying, look at what it is. It's 0.5%. It isn't that big a deal. It is a problem. It's sad for anyone to die. And it is documented by the CDC that those who are 65 and older are in the largest group of risk. These are facts. I'm not disputing those facts. I am telling you, though, that the news media, the hype surrounding those facts, are out of whack with the reality of what we are seeing from the evidence. The hype is not the same. And that is part of what we're seeing with all the rest of it. Let's rewrite the history. Let's try and pause this so that we've built up all this hype. We've built up all this fear. Don't think. Don't ask questions. Don't talk about it. It's done. There's the hype, and that's all there is. And we're done. Now, you can tell me, Mike, you just don't understand. And I'm perfectly happy to have a discussion about this. We should have a discussion in this nation. We should put this into an understanding, a context where we can all understand this. Because I am quoting the major news media, and I know that's not a reason, the YouTube censors and all, they go crazy about this, and they're like, we don't care. You quoted the news, but you quoted it wrong. You didn't quote it and make people more afraid. You have to make them afraid. I don't want you to be afraid. I want you to understand the realities of what's going on. And as much as people are talking about Delta, 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 you know what they're not talking about? Lambda. Lambda, 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 otherwise known as the Peru variant. Delta is the Indian variant. There have also been variants from the United Kingdom and from South Africa and from Brazil. We had to rename all those because it's racist to name a country. By the way, racism has nothing to do with the country you are in. You cannot be racist against a country. You cannot. It is irrefutable. This is the stupidity that we see going on in our major news media and in the progressive socialist movements. You just called that person Chinese because they're from China. That's racist. No, it's not. That's a nationality. That's a nationality. That's your country of origin. Now, you can tell me that someone is being a nationalist or anti-nationalist. You can say things like that. And you may say, well, that's just not fair. Their ethnicity is not. That's fine. But guess what? It's not racist. It's not racist to say that something is happening in Venezuela because I'm talking about Venezuela. That doesn't make it racist. It makes it me talking about Venezuela. See, that's something that we don't see a lot of. And yet in the news media, if you say, as we have traditionally done, remember the Spanish flu from back in history, 1925, as I recall, that if you name it, so if it's there's a disease that happens in China, if you say it's from China, well, now that's racist. Now, how can it be racist? That's a country. You can't be racist for mentioning a country. You can't. But that being said, the Lambda variant is from Peru. And the Lambda variant is, according to Yahoo News, vaccine resistant. And it's in the United States. The Lambda variant is in 44 states at this moment. It didn't just get into the United States. It has invaded into 44 states. And there are 1,300 people who have been affected by this at this moment. And you know why? Because the people in Peru are using the Chinese vaccine, which is 79% effective. Perhaps that's the reason why there's a new variant that is vaccine resistant, because they're using an imperfect form of vaccine, which then allows more easily for the Lambda variant of the pandemic to evolve. So when you think about that, consider what they're saying right now. Oh, well, they're paying you in the United States to get this vaccine. They are forcing you in many ways to get this vaccine. And yet we're seeing that there are variations, and they're coming from other countries that have nothing to do with the United States and whether or not you've made that decision. I think that's important to understand. And I don't think the rest of the news is telling you that. And I don't think they want you to get that understanding because they want you to be afraid. Because big numbers, big numbers. We want you to think about big numbers. Don't think about anything. 23,000. Oh my God, 23,000 people have been affected by this variant. That only affects 0.5% of them. It's only fatal to 0.5% of the most at-risk people. And they don't want you to think that, and by the way, coming right along is a new variant, because there is always going to be a variant. It's like the flu. There's always another variant. It's like SARS and Ebola. They always have a new variant. It always evolves. Some faster than others. Doesn't mean it's more deadly, just means it's changing. And by the way, according to the World Health Organization, otherwise known as WHO, on August 4th, it was in the news, but it really wasn't promoted, was the fact that the World Health Organization is calling for a moratorium on the booster doses. The WHO is telling you should not get a booster, which would mean your third shot, because other countries haven't even gotten their first or second shots. So they want you to stop getting this, because you've been seeing in the major news media, get a booster, get a booster, get a booster. It's the only way to be sure. Maybe we need 3, maybe we need 4, could be 6 shots to make sure that you're going to be okay from every single variant that ever possibly comes up. You're going to get a booster constantly for the rest of your life. But you shouldn't do that right now, because the WHO, who already said lockdowns didn't work, masks didn't work, and in fact, doing the lockdowns actually caused more damage and more harm to people around the world than not having them. That was actually the deadliest thing. That was from the WHO European director last year. And if YouTube wants to check me on this, I'm more than happy to give you that article, which came from the AP and in Reuters. As it was reported around the world, it is a fact. This is a fact being reported by the Associated Press. I don't know, folks. If you think I'm wrong, if you think it doesn't make sense, tell me. I know that, Dal is mentioning that what the media doesn't add for context is that the South's reason for illness starts earlier than the North, so of course it would pick up. Yeah. Again, these are putting things into context. I want you to have a context. You can decide to do whatever you want. I am not telling you to do or not do anything. I am trying to give you a context to make your own decisions, to understand your own conclusions. And I'm also trying to let you understand that we are seeing a revision of history. We're seeing a revision of facts, even as those facts are being presented to us. That we are seeing this is the Tetris model. They've built up this progressive tower, and they have frozen everything so that you can't talk about it, you can't act on it, you can't take any actions, otherwise they would lose. And rather than losing, what they are looking to do is to freeze everything in place so that you can't do anything, so that you can't change anything. Again, you may think I'm wrong. And by the way, you will see links to everything I am presenting so that you can read it for yourself in full context and come up to your own decisions. You don't have to believe me. I don't want you to believe me. I want you to read this. I want you to investigate this for yourself and come up with whatever decision you want with that. I'm not trying to change you. I'm trying to inform you. I'm asking you questions so that we can ask this together. And I believe the more people who are involved, the better answers we will get. Because what we see constantly from Congress and from the presidency is, depending on who's in there to varying degrees, we're seeing that they don't care. They're there for power. They're there to control us more than not. They are neo-nobles telling us how to live our lives and micromanaging us rather than us being in charge and doing the best thing for us. Because I really don't believe adding $9 trillion to the United States deficit in 8 months is in the best interest of you and me. In fact, it adds more debt. It actually increases inflation. It devalues your money. It hurts you. Getting rid of the police hurts you. Taking away your right to defend yourself because there are no police there to protect you is a danger to you. See, these are short-sighted ideas that are meant to make politicians get reelected. It doesn't make your life better. It doesn't. Making you more and more dependent on the government doesn't make you better. And by the way, when I say they are freezing this, that you can't speak about this, you can't have an opinion about this, remember that according to July 17th and most recently, in France and Germany, there are people who are fighting against the vaccine passports and the mandates that are coming out. Even when the people were told, the public was told, there won't be, you're kidding, there is no vaccine passport. No, we're not going to do that, except they're doing it. In fact, just this weekend, 250,000 people in France had a protest because they don't agree with the mandate that they were promised wouldn't happen and is happening. We talked about the mandates back in December on this program, December 2020. Told people, watch out, it's going to be coming. People said, no, Mike, you just don't understand. It's not happening. That's not real. Yeah, and you know what else isn't real? In Australia, according to an article on August 2nd, you may not have noticed this. Some people may not have heard about this. But what do you see? 300 Army personnel, although they're unarmed, and the police are in charge, except they're not, they're two separate organizations, began door-to-door visits to make sure people, if you test positive of the pandemic, that you're going to be isolated in your home. They are going around in Sydney with military, the military, And by the way, if they're unarmed and they're under the police, why do you need the military if you have a police force already? If you can already achieve this, if all they're doing is making sure that you're isolated in your home, why do they need the military to do this? Because they don't need the military to do this, except they need the military to put pressure on the individuals, to make sure you are scared and that you are isolated, and to make sure that you comply. It is the full force of government micromanaging your life. And if you think that even though it's happening in Australia, it can't happen in the United States, I will remind you that Nancy Pelosi is expanding the U.S. Capitol Police to every single state. And they answer to her, not you. And you can't ask them questions. Chris Jones. Hello, Chris. Good to see you, Chris. If you need my vacation passport, you don't need my business. A lot of people are saying that, but at the same time, let's be honest. New York City requires proof of vaccination. You can't go and eat. You can't go to a gym unless you have this. We are watching various businesses shut down Twitter, Facebook. They've shut down Google, shut down their offices, and put people back into isolation, back into remote business. Restaurants are saying you can't come in unless you have this document. You can't go to events unless you have this document. You can't enter certain business buildings for the government unless you have this document. Because this is the land of freedom. This is America, the land of choice. And if you don't have the right document, you can't do things. Because someone else in government made a decision and said, you don't have that right. That should scare people. That should make you wonder. We talk about the vaccine, literally, go back in the show, look in our notes. If you look back in our videos, you'll see in December, we were talking about the vaccination passports, that this was coming, that this is going to be a reality, that they're going to be on your phones, and that you're going to be required to use this to go and live your life. Because you were promised that you only had to put up with some inconveniences for 15 days. And if you put up with these inconveniences to flatten the curve for 15 days, that you would be able to go back to your life. 500 days later, that's now, you have not returned to your life. And it just takes a little bit more. First, you had to isolate yourself for 15 days, and then we had to do a little bit more, and we had a little bit more. Now you had to wear masks, and now you had to go out and get a vaccine, and now you're going back into your house, and you can't go to stores, and you can't go to restaurants. Don't worry, it's almost over. Just keep doing what the government tells you to do without a question, because the numbers sound really big until you realize, but it's not killing people. Not in the numbers that they keep emphasizing. They keep telling you, getting this, I mean, the expression, the impression, the feeling is that, oh, everyone's going to die. You caught it. You're going to die. That's not really what happens. Not saying that no one dies. Not saying that at all. Not saying it's not deadly. Not at all. I am saying, though, that it's, for this epidemic, it is not a massively deadly epidemic. They're covering the numbers for 2 years. This thing was spreading around since 2019. In 2009, they put the numbers from 2019 plus 2020 plus 2021 and put them all together as one big lump number. So it looks really, really, really big. Even though the numbers have been going down consistently, the spike that we're seeing currently is nowhere near the spike that we saw in 2020, that most people are doing better. I mean, these are good news. These are good things. You should be happy about this. It shows a success that we're doing well against this natural or supposedly natural disease, that we are doing well in combating this. We are winning. Except that's not the message that you get to hear every night in the news. You're hearing people saying, oh my God, those people didn't wear a mask. By the way, the Lambda variant doesn't care if you wear a mask or not. The Delta variant doesn't care if you wear a mask or not. We wore masks for a year. Guess what? It's still spreading. Masks will not stop it. Vaccinations do reduce it, it seems. Except there are variants like Lambda that don't care about that. So we need to put this in context and look at it from the positive aspect of we've reduced, insanely reduced, the number of people who potentially could die in those groups that are most likely to be at risk. And we're doing a great job with them. But that's not the message you're supposed to get. You're supposed to be afraid, you're not supposed to ask questions, and you're supposed to do as you are told. Because this tower of progressivism is on pause. Because they would lose the game if you start asking questions. You don't have to agree with me. You can tell me I'm completely wrong. I'm more than happy to hear that conversation. I'm more than happy to have that conversation. That's why we are live. But as we can see, Chris Jones, Dal, so many others who are speaking on the program with us, Mike Bowie and Tim O'Connor. You know what? Doesn't seem to be wrong. You can disagree. I'm more than happy to hear that. Let's look at something else that's important. And again, I'm looking at this from many different aspects. We're trying to give you a full view of what's going on in the world right now. Things that have not been talked about in the news for the last week, if at all, ever. And asking you to go and take one step forward. This is what's happened. What happens next? I'm asking you to understand the consequences of what's going on. The consequences of what our leaders are trying, or our elected officials are trying to do, and what's going to happen as a result. Because they're giving you the promise, not the result. They're not telling you what happens next. How about Iran? Did you hear about this? Because I had to go to the Times of Israel. Yes, I look at international news as well as U.S. news. And I advise everyone, you should probably do that to really understand what's going on. Hezbollah recently came up, and they, because they're, such wonderful people in Hezbollah, Hezbollah has now come out and they have decided that they want to threaten Israel. They stated on, it was yesterday, August 7th, they said, we wanted to tell our Israeli enemy that any airstrike against Lebanon will absolutely be met with a response, but in an appropriate and proportional way. Isn't that interesting? Lebanon, Hezbollah is coming up. The Hezbollah Secretary General, Hassan Nasrallah, made this statement yesterday or Saturday, saying, Israel, you're bad guys. We're gonna make you suffer. Don't you dare do anything. Because they're nice guys. And we're not just going to attack everyone. We're not going to be like what you saw with Palestinians and the Palestinians. No. They're not going to do that. They're not going to go as far as what we saw with Hamas. They're going to be proportional. Because they're good guys. Because they do nice things. And so you start thinking about the fact that, and I want you to understand, Hezbollah is Iran. Hezbollah works for Iran. Iran created Hezbollah. And this is from the Brookings Institute. While Hezbollah, I'm quoting, while Hezbollah leaders today downplayed this bloody legacy of suicide bombings, hijacking, hostage snatching, torture, and murder, this history foreshadows Hezbollah's subsequent success in using Israeli hostages and remains to secure the release of Palestinian and Lebanese prisoners from Israeli custody. Similar to 1985, Hezbollah also declared victory for the, quote, resistance, where do we hear those things from, enforcing the Israeli withdrawal from southern Lebanon in 2000 and for having survived the Israeli ground attack and air attacks in the devastating summer of 2006 war that Hezbollah provoked. Let me go back to what Hezbollah is saying. Hezbollah is saying, we're going to be proportional. Hezbollah is responsible for doing suicide bombings. That's how they got to power. They're a bunch of terrorists. They took terrorist actions, global terrorist actions. They went around the world. And you don't believe me? Okay. Hezbollah, that was as in the 1992 and 1994 suicide attacks, respectively, against the Israeli Embassy and Jewish Center in Buenos Aires, illustrate, Hezbollah's terrorism does not stop at the Mediterranean water's edge. They travel the world to expand their terrorism. This is documented fact. But today, they want the youth of the world, people who weren't around in the 1980s, people who weren't born maybe in the 2006, weren't paying attention to politics, and they want them to say, oh, see, we're only trying to be proportional. We're really good. We're protecting ourselves. They took suicide. They were suicide bombers. They captured people and held them hostage for political gain. And they did so because Iran runs them, pays for it all, and tells them what to do. Hezbollah is Iran, just without the name. And you should care about this because Iran is more than willing to bomb you and me to make attacks on the rest of the world through Hezbollah and some of its other agents like Hamas. Just like, and you may not have paid much attention to this yesterday, the Iranian-produced drone is responsible for an attack on a merchant ship. Iran is increasing its activity. They are attacking the rest of the world, with Hezbollah attacking Israel, with Hamas attacking Israel, the only friend of the United States in the Middle East that, Joe Biden doesn't really seem to care about. And an investigation by U.S. Central Command found that the merchant ship was hit by an Iranian-manufactured drone. This is the BBC telling us, because the United States government isn't telling us that the United States government found this out. We have to get the report from the BBC for what the United States government is doing. The attack on the MT Mercer, on the merchant ship Mercer Street, which occurred on July 29th and 30th as the vessel sailed off the coasts of Omani Island in Masraya, killed a British security guard and the Romanian captain. There are so many problems with that. We need the British government to tell the American citizens what is being done by the American government in an attack from Iran, or essentially from Iran, through its global terrorist agents like Hezbollah and Hamas. Easier as Hezbollah is getting on TV and saying, hey, don't worry. I know you're young. You don't know our history. You don't know that we did suicide bombings. Don't worry. We are good guys. We're very proportional, as they blow up tankers. This should concern you. Dal asks the question, do you foresee an alliance between the Taliban, the Ayatollah's regime? I wonder if Turkey would move against them if they are increasingly aggressive in the region. And that's kind of like what we're talking about here. And we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks now. So for months now, we've been talking about the Biden administration's failure on the international level. And there is some 46% of Americans, based on polling from June, that have stated, which was an NPR poll from June, that stated that, everyone thinks that the Biden administration doesn't know what it's doing internationally. Much like the Obama administration didn't know what it was doing internationally. And that instability, that failure of action has led to more violence in the Middle East and therefore the world than ever before. And when I say around the world, again, Hezbollah is not restricted to the Mediterranean, to the Middle East. They go around the world with global terror. The bombings in Yemen aren't in they're in the Middle East, but they're not in the Mediterranean. We see attacks in France and in England and around the world. This isn't restricted. So, folks, let me make it clear what I think is the position here. We see that the Taliban is growing in power. There is no question about that. They have been running rampant. In fact, even as the Biden administration has promised the American people, when we saw 2 weeks ago, when the Taliban came out and said, hey, the United States is running away. Bagram Airport, they left it empty. Taliban took all of the guns. They took the guns. They took cars. They took light tanks, armored personnel carriers, and such. Because that was all left. Because the Biden administration was more busy running away without telling any of our allies than trying to actually reduce the threat from Taliban. That is a fact. We reported it on this channel. It's international news. There is no question about that. So again, YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, you want to try and tell me I'm saying something wrong. These are facts. We've already shown the evidence. So as the United States has been running, the Taliban came out and said, hey, guess what? We control 80% of Afghanistan, and we're going to have control of it all. The Biden administration said, no, we're running away, but don't worry because we're still in control. It's still stable. There is no way that the Taliban is going to come back and take over power, even though they hate America. And that means that if they took power again, America's and American citizens around the world would be in danger. That's not going to happen. And here we are today. Again, I have to go to The Guardian, because U.S. News doesn't really want to talk about this. The Guardian comes out today, Sunday, August 8th, and they report that there has been a major coup in Taliban as fighters take the city of Kunduz. And that wasn't the only city that they took. In fact, they took 5 cities in the last 5 days. Basically, the Taliban has been taking over a city a day as the United States runs away as fast as possible under the Biden administration, because Biden wants to run away. He is terrified. He is losing. He's doing exactly what Obama did in this scenario. Run away. That's their plan. That's how they show leadership internationally around the world. They run away. Quoting The Guardian, the Biden administration decision in May to withdraw American troops 2 decades on from what it regards as an unwinnable war prompted a precipitous collapse in security and a rampant Taliban offensive across the country. Quote, Kunduz province capital fell into the hands of the Taliban at around 10 a.m. this morning, local officials said by phone. Kunduz city has been under Taliban attack for the past 2 months. They intensified their attacks from several directions on the city on Friday. They totally captured it today. This is the Biden administration in action. And you're not hearing about this because the U.S. news media has been remiss to tell you about what's going on anywhere. Think about it. We have not been hearing from the U.S. media. Back in January 21st, the Biden administration sent in troops into Syria, becoming more aggressive in the Middle East in certain fights. No one in the U.S. media wanted to talk about it. They actually at first said it didn't happen. Until we saw later reports, all of them coming from the international sources saying, no, it absolutely happened, and we have evidence of it. We even have photos of it. Then the U.S. media said, oh yeah, it kind of happened, but it's not a big deal. We have been constantly seeing the U.S. media playing watchdog. They've been backing off of every piece of international news and barely mentioning any of it as we see instability growing around the world, especially when it comes to Iran, because the United States, and Iran knows this, Biden administration wants to have the Iran nuclear deal. They want to prop up the Obama deal. They want Obama to have that place in history. And Iran is saying, fantastic, there are 529 economic sanctions that have been put against us by Trump, not Obama. And we need those all gone so that we can go back and do exactly what John Kerry told you they were going to do in 2016, which is they were going to do global terror. That the United States, in removing sanctions and giving $400 billion to Iran, allowed them to have global terror around the world. Yes, John Kerry did say that January 2016. Fact check me, I dare you. And yes, global terror did increase, and now we're seeing this. And the United States, under Biden administration, what Biden says, we are going to run with our tails between our legs, the mighty United States government military. They're going to run away. We're going to give up on 2 decades. We're just going to walk away without telling our allies in country what is going on. And shockingly, as the rest of the world is noticing, there's instability. And the Taliban is gaining more ground, and they are working with, the Taliban is in negotiations right now with Iran. That is a fact. We reported that 3 weeks ago. We reported on that. It is an international fact. It is known that as the new hardline government of Prime Minister Raisi is taking over, I'm sorry, I know I'm mispronouncing his last name. Raisi is the new prime minister. He's a hardliner who is known for killing his own Iranian people because they were not radical enough. He's killing his own people. He has been busy and been very active in working with these global terrorist organizations like Taliban, like Al-Qaeda, like Hezbollah and Hamas. And he is out there promoting them. And he's at this moment, working with the Taliban. He's in negotiations with them. They're expanding. And Iran is right there with them, destabilizing the entire Middle East and threatening our only ally in the Middle East, our friends in Israel. And the Biden administration's only answer is, it's not really happening. Don't worry about it. I mean, that's what he told the American people. He actually got out and made an announcement. 2 weeks ago, was it? He made the announcement. National news. No, that Taliban, Jen Psaki was speaking and said, no, Taliban, they're not going to take over. They said they're going to have 80% of the country. No, don't worry about it. It's not happening. We don't think that's going to happen. Okay. And now we have the Guardian announcing and telling us that they took over 5 cities in 5 days, including 3 of the major cities, one of them being Kunduz. But, it's not happening. Let me get back to some of the comments here, because I love hearing from you guys. I want everyone to be involved. And again, you can tell me I'm wrong anytime. You can call in 607-242-1582. More than happy to hear anyone's comments. In fact, I want to move this down so people can see it a little better. That should help you guys. So do I see, to answer Dal's question, do I see Iran working with the Taliban? They already are. They're also working with agents in Syria. They're working against the United States in many countries. Turkey doesn't really care. Turkey is only upset with the Kurds in Iraq, in the Northeast, that the United States is supporting, because Turkey finds the Northern Kurds, otherwise known as the PKK, they are a terrorist organization that the United States backs and funds. So there's a lot of problems in that region, and they have been there for a long time, and the U.S. news media doesn't talk about it at all. We've been talking about it for 5 years. The U.S. major news media is telling you, don't worry, it's all okay. Don't worry, doesn't matter what the bad guys say. It's not happening. It's not real. So I'm very upset about this, which is why I'm talking to you about it. Dow mentions there is speculation that Biden is aiming to present optics on September 11 of this year to tout the war on terror started by a Republican was ended by a Democrat, which is a lie, and it's stupid. It's a lie and it's stupid. There's so many levels of wrong with that. And by the way, if you think, I would love to hear from someone who's trying to explain to me international policy and tell me how it is improving the world. Please explain to me how the United States running as fast as possible is helping Afghanistan. Because I can tell you it's helping Iran, and Iran likes to use global terror. Iran is the leader of world global terror. That is a fact. Iran wants to see the United States dead. Whether you're a progressive, a socialist, or anything else, they don't care. They want you dead because you're an American. That is a fact. We've heard that from the Ayatollah. They have said that many, many times for many, many years under every president you can think of. Whether it's a Democrat or a Republican or a progressive, they don't care. Everything they do, and we have heard this from the Ayatollah, the prime ministers, and the Iranian National Guard. We've heard this from all of them saying that no, everything they're doing is trying to promote the ability of them to destroy the United States and Israel. That is a fact. Why are they trusting them? So to hear Joe Biden, even in speculation, to say, well, this is political, it's a Republican problem. You're an idiot and it's a lie. You can blame it on a Republican all you want. That's not true. It's a combination of Republicans and Democrats and the United States government existing, period. And the biggest problem we've had is that Democrats are more than willing to run away, even though historically we've seen every time that there's a war going on and we see someone like the United States run away, a power vacuum exists, and the very worst of people come in and take over in that power vacuum. Look at Vietnam. Look at North Korea. Look at Cuba. Look at Venezuela. We have lots of examples around the world where this happens. And when you take it, and we're seeing it right now, as Mike Bowie mentions, it's the Arab Spring, when the United States kind of sort of puts in some influence and then steps away and says, well, screw it, let's see what happens. The thing that happens is that this goes absolutely tits up, is the saying. It just goes badly. It just goes as badly as you can possibly imagine. And ultimately, that also comes back to the United States, because the global terror and the instability always comes back to the United States every single time. Yes, the Biden administration is bombing. They sent in B-52s into Afghanistan to try and make up for the fact that we ran away, and we are getting our troops out of Afghanistan as fast as possible, destabilizing the country as we go. See, I'm not upset so much that we're leaving Afghanistan after 2 decades. I'm upset that we're leaving Afghanistan as fast as possible, destroying the stability of that nation as we go, empowering our enemies who want to see us dead. See, that I'm upset about. That is a problem. That should be a concern for every American citizen, because ultimately, this is going to come back against us. Yes, he's dropping B-52s to try and slow down the Taliban. Guess what? They took 5 cities in 5 days. You're not slowing down the process. They claim to have 80% of the country before they got those 5 major cities. Let me tell you, this isn't a slowdown. That's politics. That's posturing. Sending in B-52s is posturing to make the Biden administration look good to people who don't pay attention, because the news media isn't reporting what's happening. You are being deluded because there is an obfuscation. There is a cloud being put up in front of you so that you cannot notice and you can't respond to the fact that they are screwing up the international policy so badly that people are dying because of it. As Jason mentions, pulling out of the Middle East helps Russia, Chicoms, and Iran, all in Biden's pocket. I can definitely say that the way we are leaving is the problem. At the end of the day, you can tell me that, Mike, we've been in Afghanistan for 2 decades. It would never end. We've got to leave. Same thing happened to Russia after they were in there for well over a decade, and they couldn't fix the problem. It's just a hellhole. Okay. Yes. That doesn't mean we walk out, we don't, where we go. And this is what they did in Bagram Airport. They didn't even pack up anything. They just turned off the lights and ran away. They left small arms. They left bullets and weapons and food and APCs. For people who don't understand military, they only look at it in movies. These are like in Aliens, the movie Aliens, where all the Marines were in that little truck that was armored and it was driving around. Ripley was driving it for a little while. That's called an APC. And yes, that's a movie version, but still, the concept's the same. And that's what we left for the Taliban to take. And they did take it. There is news media reporting showing that they picked up the APCs, that the Taliban has them, and they are using them to take over the cities that we are running away from. That's why they got 5 cities in 5 days. And even in looking at the Guardian article, we see they're blaming this on Biden. It's his decision in May to withdraw troops that prompted a precipitous collapse in security and a rampant Taliban offensive. The Taliban wasn't going anywhere until Biden decided to run away and not tell anybody and not give anybody any time to try and fix anything. We didn't hand the keys over to the Afghanistan government or the military forces that were supposed to be in Bagram working with us. We didn't give them the keys for everything. We didn't give them the APCs or the food or the weapons. We didn't tell them that was happening. We turned off the lights and ran away. This is the Biden administration. This is progressive socialist ideology in action. They ran away. And the bad guys swept on in. You may not like that. You may not want to believe that. You may say, Mike, that's just really terrible way of looking at that. It is also a reality. These are the consequences of the actions that are happening. Whether you like it or not has nothing to do with it. You can tell me that you're a progressive and you think it's horrible that the United States is in all these different places around the world, and I will tell you, fine, that's fantastic. That has nothing to do with what we are speaking about. The consequences of leaving the way they are doing it. It's the way they are doing it that has a consequence that will hurt America, regardless of your political ideology. Doesn't matter what you personally believe. What does matter is this is what they did, and this is the consequence of what they're doing. And it doesn't add up for America's benefit. Hezbollah is making moves against Israel. That doesn't help America. Iran is behind that. Iran is bombing merchant ships. Iran wants to get the sanctions removed so that they can fund global terror to destroy the United States as they are building ballistic missiles to be able to deliver a nuclear weapon against the United States. And the Biden administration is saying, well, that's okay. You can do all that. Just sign your name on the dotted line so that we can say the Obama deal's still here. Obama's history is secure. That's what they are looking for. And if you don't believe me, compare any of the any of the major U.S. media coverage of what's happening internationally versus what I'm showing you right now from The Guardian and around the world. You don't have to believe me. Read it for yourself. And I guarantee you, you will come up with a very different point of view than what you're hearing from the U.S. media, who isn't telling you that we're running away as fast as possible, leaving our allies with their butts hanging out in the wind. Dow mentions that I think it's more Biden is in their pocket. His administration thinks they can hold all the cards. I don't know. I can't answer that. Jason mentions that China owned everything. They will fill this void. In some places, China is. Like in Africa. Like all of Africa. I know everyone thinks in the United States, we always think of Africa as one big nation. It's not. It's like, what is it, 27 nations? And China is involved with about 2/3 of them and has major agreements with them because the United States hasn't thought about it. Because we think of Africa as one big country, and so we don't actually pay attention to anything. And that's causing us long-term problems. Again, it's the way that it's being done, because the way it's being presented by progressives and socialists in our government, we're doing things the worst way possible. Oh, it's capitalists. How? Oh, capitalism's so terrible. We can't go into Africa and help any of these poor nations develop, because then we're teaching them capitalism, and capitalism's evil. No, instead, we're letting China go in, teaching them communism, as the communists are running around making people disappear because of their religious beliefs or because of their political beliefs. That's so much better. That's such a good thing. Is anyone thinking about that? I mean, they're not thinking this through. They really aren't. Dow mentions that the president of Hungary made a comment while being interviewed by Tucker Carlson that sums it up best. He called the Biden administration a bunch of thugs, if I remember correctly. Yeah, folks, we follow a lot of news on this channel. In fact, we follow, and as you can see, we follow international as well as national news. A lot. And this is some of the stuff that's not being presented to you. And we want you to think about it. We want you to think about it. This is your First Amendment right. This is us expressing our views about our government. And when we don't do that, our government goes buck wild and makes stupid decisions. Because the people aren't informed and aren't active saying, no, don't do that. Jason mentions that critical race theory defines Africa as just black and not independent countries. Well, critical race theory would define everyone as, what box do you check? Check a box, check a box. It's the color of your skin, which is stupid, And here's a newsflash for a lot of people. Africans do not think American blacks are African. If you ask any African about American blacks, they will tell you they are not African. Kind of happens after 400 years of not being in that country. They're Americans. They will tell you, ask anyone from any African nation, no, you're Americans. You're black, but you're an American. You're not African. But critical race theory doesn't seem to understand that, doesn't understand these geopolitical events and realities, because they're trying to simplify things into a scenario that makes them the good guys and gets what they want. They want things. They don't care what you think. I'll give you a great example of this. So, there is an infrastructure deal that 67 members of the Senate voted for, $1.2 trillion, which is a ridiculous amount of money. And I want you to understand how ridiculous this is. This is from the Senate. This is Ted Cruz talking about it. And just to put this in context, because I don't want to play the whole thing, I am going to play part of it. Out of the 18 minutes that he was speaking, we're only going to play a small part. But I want you to understand that he has just explained that if the entire, what is needed in the cost of the economy, the infrastructure, is an American house, the Willis Tower, used to be the Sears Tower, is the spending that Democrats are looking to do. This is to fix our roads and bridges. Think of your house is what it would take in terms of the size. It would be your house is what is necessary to fix the roads and bridges. This is what they're spending, not on roads and bridges. In fact, this is how Ted Cruz wants you to understand, and he's putting into clear context what's going on with the infrastructure bill.
To put that in perspective, indexed for inflation, the United States government spent $4.1 trillion to win World War II. $4.1 trillion to win World War II. The greatest generation, scaling the cliffs of Normandy, beating the Nazis. The Democrats, in 7 months, are spending more than double what we spent to win World War II. This is reckless, and it's unprecedented. As Admiral Akbar said in Star Wars, it's a trap!
Yeah. He's not a comedian. Then again, he's not trying to be a comedian. This isn't a joke. It's not funny. But it is a trap. And it's a problem. It's an economic trap. We are destroying this nation economically and socially as fast as possible. I mean, imagine that. Everything that we spent for World War II, a war that started in 1939 and ended in 1945, and involved hundreds of thousands, every country in the world, this massive undertaking, and the Democrats are spending 2 times as much as that world event, and they're not building roads and bridges with it. That's really not what the money's for. They're not building roads and bridges. God help me. If this infrastructure bill was about roads and bridges, first of all, it would only cost about $200 billion, because that's what the Democrats are allocating to roads and bridges. $200 billion, which is not enough money. It is nowhere near enough money to fix the roads and bridges. But if that was the only thing that they were spending on the infrastructure bill, I'd be happy. I'd be one of the first people saying, we need to fund this. This is a good thing. But that's not what they're doing. Because the $1.2 trillion is spending about $1 trillion on everything except fixing roads and bridges and infrastructure. They're putting in stuff that has nothing to do with that and telling you it's all infrastructure. Everything and anything. Healthcare is infrastructure. No, it's not. Infrastructure or roads, it's stuff that you built. It's the stuff that you use because it was built. You know, you build a road to facilitate the ability to go from one place to another and to be able to have commerce. You have a bridge to facilitate the ability of people to go from one place to another, to be able to do more commerce. That's a very simplistic way of looking at infrastructure, but that's infrastructure. We have electricity so that people can have lights and they can do more business, more commerce. That's infrastructure. Healthcare is not infrastructure. Healthcare is healthcare. That's why we call it something completely different. You may not agree with that. You may not like that, but you can't really disagree with it. It is what it is. That is its definition. And again, I'm giving you the most simple definition of it, but that is its definition. That is what it does. To tell us that it is something else, it's about daycare, it's about you putting your kids into daycare. No, it is not. It is absolutely not about social justice. There is no social justice in whether or not an electric line carries electricity. There is no social justice on whether or not a bridge is able to allow people to cross the bridge. A road has nothing to do with social justice. It doesn't care what color is the person who's driving a car on that road. That's it. There is no social justice, but yet we are being told by the progressives that we have to have social justice in our infrastructure bill, and it is dwarfing, literally dwarfing the money that is being spent on roads and bridges. Why? Because it's a trap. Just like Ted Cruz just told you. Because they're spending 2 times what it costs us to have World War II to be able to do social justice. Not to fix the roads, not to fix the bridges, not to make sure that your lights work, but to promote social justice, to isolate people based on the color of their skin to promote racism. And if you disagree with me on that, that's fantastic. Tell me why. Tell us why. This is the world that, by the way, if people don't realize, when you're watching this program, there are people in the United Kingdom, in Germany, Canada, Peru, India, even in China, they're watching this program. They want to hear what America has to say and see the things that America is doing because it is impacting the rest of the world, whether you think it does or not. Critical race theory is an American idea, and we exported it to France and to England. And it's affecting their lives every day. When we leave Afghanistan and the Taliban grows, those refugees go to Europe and the rest of the world. It affects everyone. When Iran when we remove 529 economic sanctions on Iran, Iran is able to fund more global terror. That means that they go out into places like in Paris and do the Paris attack where they drove a car and ran over people left and right. They don't always use bombs. They don't always do suicide bombing. Sometimes they take cars and trucks and run people over, as they did in Paris, as well as the attacks that we saw in England and in Germany and in Sweden. That's why it's important. The world is watching, and they really want to know, and they want to hear what we have to say about it because they realize the American people ultimately have the power. The people in Hong Kong who got disappeared by the Communist Chinese Party realize that America has the freedom, that the American citizens actually control their government. And they celebrate. They want to have a little piece of that because they know that's a better system. And yet, the American public doesn't. Because the American media and social media are telling you, don't ask questions, don't think, just respond. You should have feelings, and your feelings should be what we tell you they are, and do what we say. Because politicians believe they're neo-nobles. And this is insane. And that's leading to these insane things where we're watching. You know what? I want you to hear what Senator Mike Lee had to say about this. I want you to see this. Because again, this is not being emphasized by the major news media. They're really not telling you this. They're really not having this discussion. I want you to see this. So here's Senator Mike Lee.
The CBO rejected the claim that this bill was paid for. In fact, the CBO concluded that 256 of the $550 billion in claimed pay-fors didn't pay, that they're not pay-fors, and thus that they will considerably, I mean, we're talking here about over $250 billion that would go right on to the debt and deficit. They also concluded that in the long run, over the next 10 years, we'll be looking at an additional $340 billion in cost to the federal government, a cost that by some estimates could reach as high as $400 billion because of the spillover effect that this bill is likely to have on future spending.
Okay, so this is according to the Congressional Budget Office, a nonpartisan part of the United States government. And their only job is to evaluate bills and how they are going to affect the economy, how they're going to affect the national debt. This is Senator Mike Lee quoting the CBO. So you don't have to like Mike Lee. You don't have to like Republicans. This is from a nonpartisan part of the government, and they are telling you this is what's going to happen. Because we've heard the progressives, we've heard the Democratic leaders, the elected officials say, don't worry, this is paid for. It's not going to affect the debt at all. It's all fine. They're telling you that, no Soundbites Allowed doesn't know what they're talking about. The debt is not going to go up even a penny. It's all paid for, and there are no new taxes. They are lying to you. And the CBO is providing you the proof. You're not hearing about that on MSNBC. You're not hearing that on CNBC or CNN. because they don't want to tell you that, because they're telling you what they want you to hear. They want you to accept this. They want this deal to go forward. They want to see all of the spending on the progressive social justice agenda, because they are progressives and socialists. And it is in their best interest. They have a political advantage, and they have a reason. They have a goal here. And that goal isn't forwarded by telling you the truth. They're telling you that, oh, the bill's paid for. No, it's not. Not only are they overspending on the things that actually aren't what this is about. If it's an infrastructure bill, and they're spending on social justice. And they're not paying for this, even though they're telling you it's all paid for. No, it's not. And it gets a little bit worse, because I want to play this other portion for you from Senator Mike Lee talking about this, about what's actually happening in this infrastructure deal.
Who you voted for in recent presidential or congressional elections. You probably don't want the federal government in your...
This is a full 3 months of food without needing any refrigeration or special storage.
You can't do anything about that.
Monitoring your every move, going where you're going. We know that when governments do that, when they start to assume that everything is government's business, bad things happen. It ends in tears and wars. That's none of the federal government's darn business. We don't want the federal government even developing technology to start snooping on every person's every move. Which brings me to yet another intrusion on personal privacy and liberty in this legislation, Section 24220. Calls for the development, and within just a few years, the formalization and finalization of regulations that would require passenger vehicles manufactured and sold within the United States to have a device that would passively measure the blood alcohol content of the driver, and do so in a way that would inhibit or at least impair the ability of the vehicle to operate, if the vehicle, in its infinite wisdom, was able to ascertain that the blood alcohol content of the driver was over 0.8.
Which means if you have mouthwash, you can't drive your car. Because the government has decided that your car needs to decide whether or not you're drunk. That they have to invade your privacy, and they have to build this into the cars. This is a problem. This is a major problem. I believe there's another section in here that's also dealing with one of the problems.
Inevitably increase the cost that home buyers will face when they go to buy a home. Now, why does that matter here? Well, we've seen a startling uptick in inflation across the board, everything from gas to groceries, everything from health care to housing. We see that increasing stunningly in a way that a lot of people are pointing out correctly, that first-time home buyers are now finding it very difficult to get into a home. This is something that's going to end up affecting all poor and middle-class Americans at a time when...
Do you hear that? This is going to affect all Americans. This is going to affect the middle class. That there is a new tax in the infrastructure deal that is paid for. They told you it's paid for, except it's not paid for, and it takes a new tax to pay for it. So for the parts, even though most of it is not paid for, then they're going to also create a new tax, which is going to affect the middle class homeowners, you and me. Isn't that fun? At the same time, we have inflation running rampant. This is terrifying. That this is what's in the bill. This is what you are not being told about. That they are putting in a new tax, and they are going to not pay for it, and it's going on to the tab for your kids. It is increasing the debt of the nation, devaluing the American dollar, all of this adding to more inflation, which means it takes more money to buy the things you need: healthcare, food, everything. You are being hurt by this goal, this effort to promote social justice. which is a progressive ideal and not an American idea. And let me be very clear about that. Socialism, progressivism, is not an American ideal. And that's not just me telling you that. Patrice Cullors, the creator of BLM, has told you she is a communist. She is promoting communism. That's why she created BLM. Bernie Sanders is a communist. He said so himself. He is here to promote communism. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a democratic socialist, otherwise a socialist, which is a communist light. She is here to promote socialism. Anna Presley, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, they're democratic. So they're here for socialism. They want to change the nation. They want to make America more like China. That's their goal. And this infrastructure bill helps them to do exactly that, to make America more socialist. That's why it's spending almost 5 times as much on social justice as it is on trying to fix bridges and roads, because they don't care if you can get to and from a place. They care about whether or not you are free and whether or not you can speak about that freedom. Jason mentions this gets a pass because we have not felt the pain of all the spending. This is all going to hit like a brick. The new taxes they want to implement are going to reduce tax revenue. This is driving businesses out of the United States. It's closing businesses around the United States. It is leaving American citizens with less. In every way that you might imagine, less. There's less businesses, less innovation, less opportunity. All in the name of social justice, all in the name of being progressive, all in the name of socialism, which are not American values. And if someone on the left would like to tell me, Mike, you misunderstand, you don't get it, this socialism is American values, please have this conversation with me. Please get on here and tell me why and how socialism is America. Don't tell me, and I understand, we have policies and programs that have some social tendencies. I get that. That doesn't define the nation. You know what defines America? The Constitution, the First Amendment, the right for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Not the guarantee of happiness, not the guarantee of anything. The pursuit of happiness. That you should have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You should have, according to the amendments, the right to be able to speak, free speech. You should have the right to defend yourself, especially when the government cannot or will not do that for you. You have the right to privacy. You have every right, and only the rights that you give to the government are the powers of the government. Our Constitution is a bill of negative rights. It denies the government rights and gives them all to American people. The government can only do what we let it do, that we give it the power to do. So please explain to me how that is the core. That is the principle. That is America. Please tell me how socialism fits into that. Because that rejects everything that socialism is. And I understand socialism promises rainbows and unicorns and candy for everyone. That is what socialism promises. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's the best utopia ever. Except that never happens. Not once, not ever. Anywhere in the world has it ever happened. Not at the beginning, not at the end. It never happens at all. And you don't have to believe me on that. There are several million, 5-6 million people from socialist nations in the United States that came here as legal immigrants that will tell you the same thing. It's not me saying it. There's 5, maybe 6, maybe more million immigrants from socialist nations that will happily tell you that, including one of my great friends and someone who I really respect, Lily Tang Williams, who we've interviewed on this program in 2016, 2019. She's been getting a lot of attention lately. She was on Tim Pool recently and with Gothics and a few others. And she was born in China under Mao, and she's telling you right now, don't do this, because this is the path towards communism, and you will hate that. Unless you like living with your entire family, living in an apartment that is the size of most studios, and only being able to have enough food to be able to maybe make it through the month if you love eating nothing but potatoes. Dow mentions that you can squeeze blood from a stone just to have to realize that the blood is yours. And that's kind of what they're doing here. He goes on to say the sovereignty of the states and the localities might stave off this encroachment of centralized authoritarianism for a time. And it should. And it can. And I hope it will. And that's what we're here to talk about. And again, I'm more than happy to hear anyone on the left who wants to tell me that, Mike, you just don't understand, you're wrong. Okay, please explain. Tell not just me, tell the rest of the world on this program and explain how we're misunderstanding this. Because we can show you example after example. We can see the consequences happening in real time in this world. We are seeing that the progressives have built up this tower of socialism, and they have put a pause on there saying the news media can't talk about consequences. Social media doesn't allow you and tries to discourage, and they try to obfuscate and just remove any conversation that would lead someone to say, hey, this doesn't add up. That's what they're doing right now. It's what the internet censorship is all about. And I know.
How are you today, Mr. Skripnik? A technician has already.
Don't know why that went off. Bear with me 1 second, because there was something, and I see your question there about the CDC. And Jason, I do want to get to that. But before I get to that, and I'm going a lot out of order from some of the things I was going to talk about. Did you hear when Senator Mike Lee mentioned something that was very important? He said that the government is trying to spy on you. They want to go into your cars, that they want to have the ability to see what's going on. Apple wants to go into your phones right now. I don't know how many people have iPhones right now. Guess what? Your iPhone is not secure. I know. Apple has touted since almost the beginning that they are privacy. They are a private phone. No one can break into your phone, that you are not going to get viruses, and no one can see what's in your information, and they will not provide that to the government. Except they're now going to go into your phones. Apple is going into your phone, and they're going to search through all of your stuff, not just what you have on the cloud. They're going into your actual phone, and they're going to look through everything you have in there. And again, this is being reported by, guess what? It's coming from The Guardian. Got to go international here to see the news. And what are they looking for? Of particular concern to security researchers and privacy activists is the fact that this new feature doesn't just look at images stored on the cloud, it scans users' devices without their consent. They are going into your phone to try and find out, do you have any images that would be of child pornography? Anything that might make them think of child pornography or abuse, bang, Apple's going to find out. And what are they going to do with that information? Who are they giving it to? What other information are they going to find along the way? What if Apple is wrong? What if Apple has a picture that they see that they don't like? Like maybe there's a picture of you with your grandpa, and you're sitting on your grandpa's lap, or your grandma's lap for that matter. What if they decide that that's child pornography? What if your mom or your dad has a picture of you as a baby, maybe as they were changing your diaper, and you might be naked in that picture? Is that child pornography? Because it seems to be. And is Apple, with their automated system, looking through everybody's phone? What if it finds that picture, and then what? And now you're going to be labeled, and what is What is Apple going to do? They're going to give that information to the government because we know that the government is working with social media and the tech giants to censor you. We know that. They've already admitted it. The Biden administration already told us they're working with Facebook to censor and to target you. They've already admitted that. And here goes Apple now saying, well, we're going to go into every iPhone and identify information that's on there, whether you tell them to or not, whether you know they're doing it or not. They're going into your phones and they're going to find out what you are doing. And then they're going to do something about it. They're going to tell somebody. And what about all the information they didn't mention? What about all that other information they're going to see along the way as they access every piece of your phone? As we see, and we've got Alexa in our homes coming out of Google, listening to people. And as we have shown on this program before, every so often we have Facebook that will automatically, if you haven't gone into your user agreement, you look in your phone, you will see that from time to time, Facebook will turn on your phone, will turn on your microphone, and just listen to what you are saying and doing. They don't tell you about it. It's part of their user agreement, and yes, it is. Look in your Facebook agreement. It says that they have the right to access your phone and your microphone at any time. Just turn it on and listen and see what's going on, whether you know it or not. And we have actually caught them when they have done that on our phone. And we put that out and we have a video on it. It's available for everyone. We've shown you the evidence that they went into our phone, turned it on, and just listened for a while. And they do that to you. And now Apple said, hey, well, if they can do that to an Android, we can do it to an iPhone. And this is all surrounded under the idea, but it's for your safety. We're doing it to protect you because we want to stop the abuse of children. So we're going to go into your phone, whether or not you've done anything, and we're going to find out if you've ever done anything. And don't worry, we are secure. We won't tell anyone about all those other photos you have. You with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, your significant other, those accidents you had, that night you were out drinking. We're not going to tell anyone about that stuff, even though we have it all on record. We're going to have a copy of everything you ever did, every message you ever sent to anyone, everything you ever said to someone, that argument you had with your mom, your significant other, your boss, whomever, all of that, that secret information on trade and business that you had, where you're developing that new company, where you're making that business deal, all of that information, we have access to all of that. That's what Apple's saying. And they're going to say, but we're not going to tell anyone. We're not even going to tell you that we did it. And this is what the Biden administration is promoting. And this is what's going into the infrastructure bill. This is how they are promoting this. This is what socialism, when I say socialism is coming into the United States, this is what I mean. I know Tina says, refuse to comply. If any business asks for it, take your business elsewhere and be sure to let them know why. And she's mentioning who judges what each picture is, an algorithm by that social media company. And as we know, with algorithms, like with Twitter, as Jack Dorsey has mentioned, 800,000 people were suppressed, including members of Congress, and all of them happen to be of the same political affiliation and ideology. Oops, that was a mistake, and that will be Apple's answer. Oh, that was just you and your grandpa? That was a picture of you as a baby? That was a private conversation between you and a business, your lawyer, your attorney. Oh, oops. We're sorry. Our mistake. Oh, well. And that's going to be their answer. Yeah, Dow mentions Apple will give it to the Capitol Police. That's fine. Hey, who's worried? Who's upset? Exactly. Because we have Capitol Police going on. And again, these are all things that are happening. And I can't tell you, and no one can tell you, that they wouldn't do that. See, that's the part that's upsetting. Because a lot of people, you don't know that. Yes, and you can't tell me it can't happen. No, I don't know if Apple's going to give that information to the United States government, to the U.S. Capitol Police, to the FBI, CIA, or to the Taliban, for all I know. I don't know who they're going to give it to, which is a problem because it's our personal information. Thank God I don't use iPhone. But that's the problem. You don't know who it's going to. I can tell you, like Dal says, I can say it's going to the Capitol Police. You can't tell me I'm wrong. I could say it's going to the FBI. You can't say that's not right. I could say that it's going to Iran and the Iran Revolutionary Guard and Hezbollah and to Hamas. And you can't tell me, Mike, that's wrong. You don't know. You don't know what they collected. You don't know that they were in your phone. And the government is promoting this. Just like they're promoting that you shouldn't, that Facebook should be able to target you because the government said so. So they should censor you because the government said so. And that's why we have Democrats like Dick Durbin who are coming around and saying, oh, we need to have even more censorship. Senator Blumenthal, we need to have more censorship on the internet. To protect you. We have to have more censorship so that you're protected from all those voices you don't like. Guess what? There are a lot of people who don't like me. They don't like my political point of view. Guess what? Millions of them are not watching this channel right now. I'm not saying I'm not the biggest person in the world. I'm not the best person in the world. I'm not trying to say that. We do very well. We're in the top 100,000 news channels on YouTube. That's a fact. 50 million channels on YouTube. We're in the top 100,000 in news, and we are growing by the day. Thank you for subscribing. It's very important. And guess what? The people who don't want to pay attention to news aren't watching the program. You want to know about movies? Guess what? There are hundreds of thousands of channels talking about the Suicide Squad right now. They're doing analysis on all kinds of movies. There are people who are talking about games and video games, and you can go out and watch Twitch and people playing video games. You're not forced to be able to do one thing. So why do you need the government's protection? If the government said, oh, all the news channels, all the news programs on YouTube and the social media, none of them can exist anymore. Because they're all misinforming you, because they're all full of disinformation. And if they got rid of every single one of them, is that going to actually protect you? Or is that protecting the government? Or allies of the government? You know, organizations like CNBC, CNN, that make tens of millions of dollars to tell you about the world news in 30 seconds. What takes us 2 hours on this program, they tell you on the news today in 30 to 45 seconds. Think about that. What we've told you and what we have shown you about the infrastructure bill, they won't even go over for you. At the most, you'll see in most news media, they'll tell you in one sentence. Oh, Mike Lee doesn't like the infrastructure bill. Next sentence. Ted Cruz doesn't like the infrastructure bill. Next sentence. Oh, but Nancy Pelosi loves it. Joe Biden says this is important. And by the way, all the activists are telling you, all the progressive activists out there say this is the most incredible bill because it's about social justice. Because remember, everything is racism, including that rock that we started the show off talking about. That's right. Racism is so omnipresent, it existed 2 billion years ago in a rock before we even knew what racism could possibly be. The warning signs were always there, and we just didn't pay attention to it. That's what the news will pay attention to, and they don't want to tell you the rest of it. And this is why I have to go to international news to find out what's going on in Afghanistan, to find out that the Taliban has taken over 5 cities in 5 days. As the American news media says, hey, we just flew a B-52 to take out the Taliban. Excuse me, you're doing a piss poor job because the Taliban just took over 5 cities. that B-52 didn't get the job done. Perhaps it's because, like The Guardian had mentioned, it's because the Biden administration has been running away with its tail between its legs since May. You may not agree with me. You may not love that, but it's true. And part of that problem, part of that process is, in fact, Apple being able to go in and access your phones. And it doesn't end there. You know, it doesn't end there. Did you know that the Supreme Court, according to The Hill, the Supreme Court's going to make gerrymandering more possible? Exactly, looking at G. Michael Parsons, who's a scholar at New York University School of Law. And he says that now that the Supreme Court has officially retreated from the area, talking about gerrymandering and politics, they have set off what will likely be an arms race between the parties to gerrymander to the fullest extent that they can in the United States where they hold control. In other words, in New York and California, they are going to rearrange their districts, their congressional districts, so that Democrats will have more power. In Texas, they're going to restructure the districts so that Republicans will have more power. And you may say, well, that's great. I'm a Republican. I want more power. Or you're a Democrat and you say, I want more power. The problem is that has nothing to do with the people. It has nothing to do with what people actually want. I'll give you a great example of that. I live in the New York 22nd District. The New York 22nd District, which comprises 8 counties, is in general, actually more than in general, it is a concentration of Republicans in New York State. See, most people don't realize New York State is not the bluest of blue Democratic strongholds. It is not. New York City is a Democratic stronghold and is absolutely blue. Albany and Syracuse are absolutely Democratic strongholds. The rest of the state is pretty much Republican. They're conservative. They're not Democrats. They're not progressives. They're not socialists. They're like the rest of the nation. They're not the far left. But yet New York State votes and New York State promotes socialism and progressivism. That's because of the way that the lines are made. See, when we had the judge actually get involved in 2010, New York State created the current outlook. And that's why the New York 22nd District is made up of 8 counties, and it has a lean of plus 6% towards Republicans. There's 6% more Republicans in this central New York area than the rest of the state. Guess what the Democrats are going to do? In 2021, the beginning of next year, 2022, January, they're going to change the entire system. They're going to break that up. And even though all the people who are already living here, who are naturally leaning towards conservatism and Republicans, and they're going to split that up so that they're all this huge concentration of Republicans are suddenly surrounded by and overweighted by Democrats. So that, give me a second, folks. Really? My God, I'm trying to do this live and I'm having, don't know, system crashed for no reason. There we go. Sorry about that, folks. Don't know why part of the system crashed out of the blue. So, I'm trying to make this very clear. So this gerrymandering works against you. I mean, if you look at the New York 22nd District back in 2008, it looked nothing like it does today. Why? Because all of the Democrats were grouped together to make sure that all the Republicans would be silent. It's a way of silencing you, of destroying your voice, of making your vote not count. Not that you can't go out and vote, but that when you do go out and vote, it's not getting the same treatment because you're being drowned out. Literally, you're being drowned. But it's been a little while since I actually looked at the comments, and especially with the system dropping, so I want to come back. Dow mentions that contacts, photos, audio archives, third-party applications, scrutiny for everything. That's what Apple's looking to do. And I guarantee you, if Apple's doing it, Android will be right behind them. Tina mentions, hello, Tina. And once you are labeled, your life is ruined, whether it's a mistake or not. Yeah. Notice there's never a consequence to these things. It's kind of like the red flag laws. If they get it wrong, oops, sorry, just a mistake. How could we have possibly known? They've already ruined your life, destroyed you. Your image doesn't matter. They're going to keep going. Because it's about scaring people. It's about, and how many times have they made that mistake on purpose just so that they could silence someone? Last, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, it was YouTube silenced us because we quoted the news media, because we quoted the Hawaii Tribune and the AP News and Reuters. Oops, sorry. They silenced, and they, what was it? It was Twitter. They suspended Dave Rubin, and then a day later turned around and went, oops, we're sorry. You didn't actually do anything wrong. You just quoted the major news media. Oh, and we're sorry. See, that's what they're doing right now. And that's a problem, because they're using people as examples to punish them so that everyone else will stay quiet and be compliant and do what they are told. And that is a problem. Mike mentions, whatever happened to the Fourth Amendment? Whatever happened to the Third Amendment? What happened to the Second? What's happening to the First? They are being ignored as they are being restructured. Remember, we're being told things like the Second Amendment only apply to hunting. No, that's not true. It was never about hunting. We're being told by, how many times has Biden gone on to national TV and said, oh, there have always been restrictions on the Second Amendment? No, that is not true. It is a pants on fire, not true, fact-checked item. It's not true, but he's saying it. And the news media, when he tells the major news media, oh, he's talking to CNN at a CNN town hall, and they are allowing him to say, oh, there's always been restrictions on the Second Amendment. And the reporters, who are supposed to know better and are right there, don't correct him and say, Mr. President, that's actually not true. That is absolutely a lie. When he goes and says it was on CNN in their town hall, as we showed in evidence that was later removed by YouTube, Joe Biden was at town hall and said, oh, if you've got the vaccination, guess what? You won't go to an ICU. You won't die from the pandemic. That is a lie. That's not true. Dow mentions, I wonder how aggravated the powers that be get when people start trending conversations like yours and Alex Jones and adding to 2 cents. They get very upset. And that's why suddenly we have things like the systems crash. We have the feeds are cut, or that there's issues in the transmission, so there are big delays while you are live. These are all things called shadow banning. You have algorithms that accidentally, year after year after year, literally, you can go back the last 5 years, that Twitter has appeared before Congress, either the Senate or the House of Representatives, and they have said, oops, the algorithm accidentally is censoring against Republicans and conservatives. We're sorry, even though it's affecting hundreds, 800,000 people and members of Congress. Oops, it's an accident. How could we know? This is only the 5th year in a row that this has happened. That's what they do. And they get very upset. And they target people. That's what they do. You don't have to agree with me. But I'd like to see the evidence. I'm showing you and I'm telling you the evidence proving my point. I'd like to see the evidence saying it's wrong. You know what? Show me the hundreds of thousands of Democrats, of progressives and socialists that have been removed from YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, who have been denounced by the major news media. Because I can tell you, you won't find it. You won't find it. You know what? You can go and look up BLM on Facebook and find them. You can look up Antifa, a domestic terrorist organization, Antifa, and they have Facebook pages. No one's blocking those. You can look at their writings and some of the things they've said. The Ayatollah Khomeini, the Ayatollah of Iran, is promising to kill Iran and the United States. He's got a Twitter page. So, no, they are targeting us, and they're targeting us in many ways. And they want you to be silent. They don't want you to speak. Because if you say, oh, Mike, that's, I kind of agree with that. You don't even have to agree with me a whole lot. You can say, well, I can see where you're coming from. That is dangerous to them. Because, again, using the analogy for the show today, that takes the Tetris model and turns the game back on. And they lose. It's no longer paused. We instantly lose because they have built it up and it's fragile. And this progressive tower is ready to fall over the second someone starts saying, well, that doesn't make any sense. That's not right. Tina mentions, what are the international news sources that I go to? I go to the BBC, Israeli Times, Al Jazeera, The Guardian. I go to Sky News. Those are the ones I'm just thinking of off the top of my head. Investors Business Daily. Few others. There's the Bangkok News and the Indian Times. There's a couple of others. But those are a couple of the sources that, off the top of my head, that I go to. The Russian Times, RT, their news. I look at them as well. So yeah, it's not just, Mike's looking for the right wing. No, I read everybody. I read the Wall Street Journal as much as I read anything else. I read the BBC, and I go to, in fact, almost all the news is left-wing news. So you can't help but get that. But I tend to check out all these sources, and I compare them, like we can see here today, to try and get a good understanding of any one issue. So, one of the things I wanted to also bring up, and this is coming from, in particular, Texas Tribune. Do you remember that there are 50 Democrats from Texas, part of the state legislature of Texas, that instead of doing their job, ran away and came over to Washington, D.C.? Actually, to be exact, 48 of them came to Washington, D.C. 2 of them are on vacation overseas on an island, having a great time, sitting on their butts on a beach in a vacation as they are being paid by taxpayers in Texas as they are avoiding their job. And the moment that they return to Texas, they will be arrested. But 48 of them are in Washington, D.C. right now. And as we showed you last week with Nancy Mace and Representative Chip Roy, they were questioned on why are they not doing their job, which the ultimate answer is because they're going to lose, because they don't want to do their job, because they don't like the result. The result will be that in Texas, you will need an ID to go and vote. They don't like that. They want you to think that that means that black people won't be able to vote in Texas. That is a lie. Right now, they're trying to tell you that, well, something like 40%, I think it was Representative Johnson out of Texas, said, oh, no, 40% of blacks are actually registered to vote. Actually, that number is 70. They're not, and like only 30% of blacks are actually going out and voting. Actually, the real number is 64%. By the way, whites are 72% registered to vote in Texas, only 2% more than blacks, and 65% of whites go out and vote in elections, only 1% more than blacks in Texas. So the representation is pretty good. In fact, that's why Texas ranks number 10. And they are upset about this because you are not supposed to have this conversation. You are not supposed to know this. And so therefore, this is being used against you. But I wanted to point out that these Democrats, even though they are on vacation on a beach with taxpayer money, and even though they are in Washington, D.C., pleading with people to understand that it's social justice and that they are protecting black people from something black people already do, that they are in the process right now, they are suing. They are suing the state of Texas, and they are suing Republicans because they are oppressed. Let me get to the quote. Because of the defendants' actions, which would be the Republicans and the state of Texas, the complainant, the Texas Democrats that ran away from Texas, allege that the plaintiffs have been, quote, deprived of liberty for substantial periods of time, suffered much anxiety and distress over separation from their families, and much discomfort and embarrassment, end quote. Really? So I want to be very clear. These Republicans, these Democrats are standing here in front of the American people, and they are saying they need to sue Texas because Texas is embarrassing them, because Texas is put them into discomfort, and because they're separated from their families. The state of Texas never told them to leave the state of Texas. Neither the Republican Party nor Texas told them to run to Washington, D.C., and for two of them to go on vacation on taxpayer dime. The only anxiety they have is that they don't want to go and do their job, to take a vote where they will lose on a bill that they want to win. That's their anxiety. They're deprived of liberty. No one's deprived them of their liberty. They're in Washington, D.C. They're talking to Congress. They're on national news media. No one's denied them their constitutional rights, their freedom, their liberty. The only reason they would be arrested is so that they could be, when they come back to Texas, they will be arrested so that they can go do their job. They're going to be taken straight to the court, to the legislature of Texas, so that they can vote and do their job. That's it. But they want you to believe that this is about racism. This is evil. These are Republicans that are beating up on us. Republicans didn't make them leave on a private jet without masks, spreading COVID. No Republican made them do that. The Democrats did that on their own. No one made them do that. No one gives them anxiety about a vote. Just because they're going to lose doesn't mean that you should have anxiety. That's part of politics. Sometimes you lose votes. That's the anxiety is their own. That's not someone else. Distressed over separation, they separated themselves from their family. They ran away. No one else made them do that. They did that. They got a private jet. They went on vacation to a private island to be able to sit on a beach. No one made them do that. That was their choice. And they have the choice, the freedom to come back to Texas and to do their job. And they're choosing not to. They're discomforted and they are embarrassed because everyone else in the nation understands that they are being paid to do a job and they're not doing it. because everyone, including their constituents, understand that they're being petulant little children having a tantrum rather than doing their job. And there is a lawsuit for this. Can you believe this crap? Dow mentions, I think too much of journalism as a field has given over to commentary because of how consumers ingest their news. We've been trained as a general populace to ignore the machinations of government and let the media present the appropriate narrative. Yeah, to an extent, we have. I would generally agree with that. Because, well, most people are told, don't complain. Don't even question. Don't even think about it. And that's a problem. And that's, I think, is a very big problem in our news media. But I think it's also galling. I think it's incredibly galling that these individuals are coming together and they're suing to make people think that this is about social justice, that this is about racism. Because again, if you listen to them speak about it, if you listen to them as they were talking to in Congress to Representative Nancy Mace, if they were talking to Representative Chip Roy, they're telling you it's all about race. It's about racism. Don't you know it's racist? Except there is no racism. No one chased them out of Texas because they were black or Hispanic or white. No one cared. No one chased them out of Texas because they were Democrat. No one chased them out of Texas. But they're blaming it on racism. They're telling you that it's because they're progressives. They're trying to get your sympathy. And why do they need your sympathy? Why do they need you to believe that? Well, I'll tell you why. Because if people really want to blow up one figure here or there, or one word, I would argue that they're missing the forest for the trees. I think that there's a lot of people more concerned about being precisely, factually, and semantically correct than being about morally right. Who said that? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. On 60 Minutes, January 6, 2019. That's who said that. And that's what the Texas Democrats are doing. That's what the Texas Democrats are all about. They want to feel like they are doing the right thing, even though they are factually, precisely, and semantically wrong. That they are doing the wrong thing. That they are failing to do their job. They are depriving their constituents of their of the obligation that these people have sworn to. They are failing in every aspect, and it's not their fault, according to them, because they believe what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez believes, that it's, you know what, it's all just so mean. They're being mean. It's unfair. It's unfair that, they're being held to do their jobs, that they're being expected to do their jobs. It's unfair that they're not going to get their way. So unfair, so absolutely mean. How terrible. This has to be someone's fault, and they're going to sue. You know what? I hope that they do, when they sue, and I guarantee you the lawsuit's going to get dropped in a minute, because what the Republicans in Texas should do is start the investigation and then do a discovery, which is allowed, where the Republicans are able to ask them about everything. Let's go into everything. Who put this plan together? Who bought the tickets and rented out the private jet to fly them to Washington, D.C.? Who put them into hotel rooms in Washington, D.C.? Who are they meeting with? Who organized this? Let's find out. Michael says, again, where are the adults? This is so sad. It is absolutely sad. But this is what we are expected to believe. And by the way, if you think that's really bad, this was so important that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is potentially thinking of running for Congress. And even though CNN is saying that she may go up against Chuck Schumer, she's going to go up against Kirsten Gillibrand. She says, I know it drives everybody nuts, but the way I feel about this and the way that I really approach my politics and my political career is that I do not look at things and I do not set my course positionally. I want you to understand that. Hear what she says. I really approach my politics and my political career is that I do not look at things and I do not set my course. I do not look at things. Gee, are you surprised that the woman who doesn't believe in facts being semantically or otherwise precise doesn't have a plan, that she doesn't set a course, that she doesn't know what she's doing or what she's talking about? Because that's what she has just said. I wanted to be very, very clear. This is from CNN Politics. She has just told you she doesn't know what she's doing. She has no idea what she's going on. And she told 60 Minutes that she doesn't follow the facts. She doesn't care about the facts. So she has no idea where she's going, and she has no idea what she's doing, and she doesn't care what she is saying. And she wants to run for the Senate. She wants more power. And there are millions of people who are going to give her that power because they say, she is a genius. She's so smart. Yeah, let's just print more money. That's what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says. That's the economy. Just print more money. Just do it. Just be more socialist. That's her plan. That's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez because she's Hispanic and she's young and she's got big bug eyes. And you know what? That's all you need. Who cares about facts, math, being able to speak properly? Who cares about all that stuff? This is your government. This is your government, yours and mine. And if you say, well, you know, that's New York State, let me remind you, the Texas Democrats are doing exactly what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is reminding them of. They're not being factually correct. They're not being semantically correct. They are not following the rules and the laws and obligations that they swore to. They're not doing their job. They're following their feelings. And their feelings said, we're going to lose, so let's run away. Kind of like the Biden administration. We're going to run away. We're not going to do our jobs. We're not going to worry about the consequences. We're going to run away and blame the people who are doing their job, who are paying attention to the consequences. We're going to blame them instead. If that's not Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez not understanding the consequences of her actions and not paying attention to the details, I don't know what is. And again, the phone line is on 607-242-1582. You are happy to send in a comment, as you see so many other people are doing, and tell me where I'm wrong. How am I misunderstanding what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is looking to do? How am I misunderstanding what her goal is? As a Democratic Socialist, please explain to me why their party is so absolutely obsessed with the idea of emotions as opposed to any facts, any reality, or actually having an understanding of the consequences of their actions. You don't have to agree with me, but tell me why. Please explain to me why I'm wrong. There's one other thing I should probably get to before we end the show today, and that is talking about Andrew Cuomo. So I want to talk about Andrew Cuomo. Obviously, I think everybody has had the opportunity to hear that due to an investigation by Attorney General Letitia James, we have found out that there are 11 women who have suffered from sexual harassment and sexual abuse by Governor Andrew Cuomo. And it was Governor Andrew Cuomo, who said, and we quote, on May 17th of 2013, based on his tweet, as we see here, there should be zero tolerance policy when it comes to sexual harassment and must send a clear message that this behavior is not tolerated. That's Andrew Cuomo, May 17th of 2013. This is Andrew Cuomo this is Andrew Cuomo, August 3rd of 2021.
Clear. That never happened.
CBS News leaked.
That never happened. Be clear. That never happened.
CBS News legal analyst Ricky Kleeman says the victim's word is enough to move the case forward.
It is not likely that he would spend time in jail, but it certainly is possible.
The Albany sheriff.
So that's because we see that there has now been a criminal charge that has been put forth, as we were just showing you. There is now a woman who has criminally charged Governor Cuomo of sexual assault, which is something that Governor Cuomo has denied publicly. And he's telling us to believe him, to trust him. Except he's also admitted that he killed 16,000 people in nursing homes that were unnecessary. He's admitted that we've seen the admissions from his office that he actually tried to cover this up, both from the federal government and from the public. And we know that he told this to the Democratic Party of New York State, of the elected Democrat leaders in a meeting, in a private conversation, speaking with them only, not the public. He admitted, his staff admitted, that this was something that was done, that they deceived the public on purpose because of politics on killing 16,000 people. Why should we believe that he is innocent? Because he said so? He's the one who created a Moreland Commission to end corruption in New York State. And when that corruption, that investigation started getting around people he knew, he killed the investigation. Just stopped it. Who knows who else they were going to get involved? He's the man who we know for a fact used, or at least we believe for a fact that he has used members of the state government to write his book that he got $5 million for, telling us how wonderful he is in the COVID crisis as he killed 16,000 American citizens for politics. See, I know most people are focused on this sexual harassment, that 11 people had harassment and or assaults. And that's the big deal. And that's the thing people are focused on. That's what the investigation from the AG, they focused only on the fact he's a sexual assault. He sexually abused women. I focus on he killed 16,000 people. Murder is a higher category than sexual assault. Point blank. You may think I'm wrong. You may say, Mike, that just doesn't make sense. No, your priority is wrong. I'm sorry. My priority is that murder is higher of a priority than sexual assault and sexual abuse. Do I think both should be punished? Absolutely. But, I think murder is a higher problem. And on top of that, there's 16,000 of them versus 11. The priority is the murders. For me, Andrew Cuomo should have been removed from office a long time ago because of what he did to 16,000 people and their families as he made a profit on their dead bodies. That is insulting to me. That is aggravating. That is something that needs to be punished. Instead, it is being swept under the cover. It is being pushed away. You're not supposed to talk about it. You're not supposed to think about it. No one should mention that he is responsible for this and that he has admitted this to Democrats because he knows the Democrats won't say anything publicly about it. And they haven't. Even though we found out the leaks, it was reported by the New York Post, even though we know that these quotes exist, even though he has admitted that these statements were made, he has never denied it. He won't talk about it. And the Democrats don't ask him about it. And the major news media won't go over it. CBS News that we just saw had him on as he defends himself, as he says, I didn't do that. He's asking us to believe that he didn't do it, that he's innocent. Even though we know that he's also admitted that he's corrupt and that he has taken people's lives and got paid to do it. Why in the world should we believe him now? So would I like to see him thrown in jail for those 11 women? Yeah. More importantly, I'd like to see him thrown out of office and in jail for the 16,000 people that he murdered. But guess what? As CBS News had a lawyer on referring this, he's probably never going to see a day in jail. And you know what's really bad about that? He won't go to jail. Even though, let's go with the least thing that we know that he did. He sexually abused and harassed 11 women. Won't see a day in jail, even though he himself in 2013 said that these people need to be punished harshly. Zero tolerance. And what's going to happen? He's going to have $18 million, as we covered earlier this week. He's going to have $18 million that he's going to use to influence Democratic politics in New York State and possibly around the country. He's still going to be wheeling and dealing and having power, which is why so many Democrats are absolutely terrified of saying anything and doing anything right now. Are they jumping on a bandwagon? Absolutely. Is he still in power today? Yes, he is. 11 cases of Me Too thrown right out the window. 11 cases of Me Too. The Attorney General, who found that he is absolutely unlawful, didn't bring a single charge. That's a problem. Even as we are now seeing that one of the victims is coming forward, providing her name, providing her face, and saying, hey, Governor Cuomo was wrong. That he definitely did something to her. He assaulted her, and he should not have power. And we see that the sheriff of Albany is looking to arrest Cuomo. And Cuomo is looking to win his next election. You know, and even Claudia Tenney brought up, as we had shown earlier in the week that she had spoken about this, she mentions that even Act Blue on August 6th has ditched Cuomo. When you've lost the company that raised money for the bail funds of BLM voters, you know you're done. For once, he's not going to be able to bully his way out of this one. It's a fitting end. And I agree with Claudia Tenney, who is a congresswoman. She is the congresswoman of the New York 22nd District. And I agree with Claudia Tenney that she's right, that Act Blue, a left-wing progressive organization funneling money into various Democrats around the country, the fact that they're not going to be behind him is a good sign that he is done as governor. But I disagree that means he's done, because he still has $18 million in a war chest that he can split up to whomever he wants in the Democratic Party, which gives him power, because Democrats want the money, they want the power, they want to be reelected. So Andrew Cuomo is still in their good graces. This guy is not gone. All right, so one final thing to cover here, because I think it's important. And I thank everyone who's been watching the show and seeing what's going on. And I do want you, if you found any of this to be informative and interesting, please do like and share. Most of all, please subscribe. Your subscriptions are important because it lets this reach more and more people to add their voices, as you've seen with Mike Bowie and so many others, Tina and Dowd and Jason and everybody. And I look forward to this every week. I'm going to answer your question in 1 second. So please do subscribe, because it lets it reach more people around the world. And they are paying attention because they want to see what Americans think about what the Biden administration is doing in Afghanistan and Iran and with Iraq. They want to understand what what's coming next from America being imported into the United Kingdom, into France, into Germany, into Canada and Mexico and Peru. They want to know what's going to happen to the American economy because it's going to affect their economy too. And I'm about to mention what's happening in Mexico with the Mexican government. That's going to affect the American economy even more. And your right to own a firearm. But Michael mentions 16,000 families also denied access to their loved ones as they died alone. I think he will be facing a mountain of civil suits. I hope he will be, but there's no guarantee that he will. Because we can see Democrats have no willpower. New York State Democrats, the Assembly and the Senate, they have no will to do anything. They don't even want to take away his emergency powers. He's still governor right this second. Remember the Me Too movement getting rid of Al Franken? I really feel bad for Al Franken at this moment. Al Franken was stripped of his Senate seat for a picture. Andrew Cuomo has been accused. 9 women came out publicly and accused him of sexual assault and harassment. 2 more were found in an investigation of 179 people. He's been found because of that investigation run by Democrats in a Democratic state. He was found to be unlawful, which means guilty, a criminal in their investigation, and he's still sitting there pretty. They have no will and no desire to go into the fact that he also killed 16,000 people. They don't even talk about it anymore. It's not even something brought up. The major news media won't even mention it. So that tells you what's going on there. But that's not it. Because something else that probably most people did not notice. From August 5th, 3 days ago, from Democracy Now! I'm quoting Democracy Now!, which is found on NPR. Doesn't get more left-wing than this. This is progressive as you go. Mexican government sues Glock, Colt, and gun makers in the U.S. federal court. And by the way, this is the entire article. This is it. This is a big deal. From Democracy Now!, left-wing news, major deal. It affects the Second Amendment. It affects the U.S. economy. It affects global economy. It's about people's lives and death. It's about guns and gun violence. And they have a paragraph and a half. This is modern political coverage. This is news media. This is the major news media. Paragraph and a half. To tell you that Mexico's government is going to be suing the United States. They're suing gun manufacturers. And it's the first time U.S. gun makers have been sued by a foreign government. Mexican Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard announced the lawsuit on Wednesday, and he said the companies named in the lawsuit should provide compensation to Mexico for the damages caused by their negligent practices. The amount in this case will be determined by a judge. Now you're saying, wait a minute, what negligent practices? What did they do? What in the world could they have done? Well, you have to ask Reuters. And again, have to go over outside the U.S. news media, and you see Mexico details note to U.S. over Obama-era gun running. This is from May 12th, 2020. That you didn't notice, that no one really talked about. And I'll be honest, I missed this news too. On May 12th, what did the Mexican government say? Well, one of their officials, Calderon, said he's a political rival to Lopez Obrador, their president. He said there was no agreement between Mexico and the United States to permit illicit entry of arms. Yeah, this is all about Fast and Furious. The Mexican government, according to Democracy Now! NPR News, that the Mexican government is suing the United States because of Fast and Furious under the Obama administration, when we took firearms and shipped them into Mexico, where the United States government, the ATF, sent guns into Mexico without telling Mexico, apparently. We didn't tell Mexico that we were sending guns that helped to kill 300,000 people in the fight against drugs. This was done by the Obama administration. The suing, Dow mentions the suing of gun manufacturers in this line with leftist policy on destroying gun culture. So the gun manufacturers are being sued for selling firearms to the ATF, who ran the guns to the cartels. Yes. Because this is about the Second Amendment. Because this is about politics. Because Joe Biden hates guns. Because progressives hate firearms. And they don't want you to have the ability to protect yourself. And because of that, that allows something that has never happened before. Even under the Obama administration, an administration so far left that they had BLM come to the White House. So far left that they are absolutely socialists. No. Even that was not far enough. Now we are watching, under the Biden administration, that Mexico is suing the United States gun manufacturers for something that the United States government did without telling anyone. The ATF did this, and they didn't tell the American people. They didn't even know. They didn't tell the Mexican government. They were just doing it. And they lost the guns along the way. They were selling guns to the cartels, and they lost the guns, and they helped commit crime. Notice there's a consistent thing that's happening here. You know, the ATF, under the Obama administration, under the progressives in the United States, when they had control, we lost hundreds of thousands of guns. We lost thousands of guns, to be more accurate. We lost thousands of guns in Mexico with drug cartels getting them. And those drug cartels use those guns to kill Mexicans and Americans. Under the Biden administration, what are we seeing? The Biden administration is over here busy giving money to Hamas. $75 million was given to Hamas, who then bought Iranian rockets and tried to kill Israeli women and children. Gee, do you see a trend here? Where one hand is, the progressives are just doing stuff and they're not thinking about the consequences of their actions. Think about what they're doing with Iran trying to fund global terror. They're running away from Afghanistan. They're busy trying to spend money destroying the American economy, spending double what it cost for World War II to promote social justice, which is promoting racism. And if you question them, just like the Texas Democrats, they will turn around and say, well, it's your fault that we are feeling bad and that we're doing bad because you questioned us on how badly we were screwing things up. Because the Democrats did not consider the consequences of their actions, it's your fault. Because you brought up the fact that you paid attention and you let them actually screw up the nation. So it's our fault. Dow mentions, honestly, it shouldn't be the manufacturers being sued, but the government and its subsidiary bureaus. Mexico wouldn't have a winnable case that way. So they sue the manufacturers, win, break the industry, get money, increase goodwill with their current administration in helping promote fire mission prohibition policies. Well, think about it. Dow, you made a great point. If they can't take away the Second Amendment, if there's too many Americans, 5 million Americans last year, including many Democrats, became first-time gun owners. It's about 165 million gun owners in America. 99.997% of them are law-abiding citizens. That is an exact figure. You can do the math. That is correct. 99.997% of gun owners in the United States, perfectly law-abiding. You can't take away their guns. So what is the only answer? Take away the gun manufacturers. Mexico sues gun manufacturers, bankrupts them. There are no more guns being made in America by Americans. Sounds far-fetched? And yet, look at what we're watching. Look at where they're going. And again, to bring it back to the title of the show, this is the Tetris model. They built up this progressive tower. All these things are piling on top of each other, and then they pause the game. Just before everything falls apart, they pause the game so that you can't get involved and you can't stop them. Everything they've done is in place, and you can't fix it. Because if you fix it, they will lose. They paused the game. They stopped everything. So that you can't be involved, so that you can't fix anything, so that your voice can't be heard. And that really upsets me. And social media will silence us. In fact, it looks like the show was... wow. For a while there, it looks like the show was just being slapped down. Because the internet overlords don't like me mentioning these things, making you think. Kind of tells you a lot there. All right, folks. So we've been on for 3 hours, 15 minutes. Wow. Long show. But of course, we always enjoy having conversations with you. Every week, Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we get on live so that you can speak to us from anywhere in the world and to share with us your thoughts. And if you missed the show and you're watching it afterwards, please leave your comments leave comments on this, whether you've seen it on YouTube, Facebook, DLive, wherever you've seen it. Let us hear your comments, hear your thoughts. Please, if you've liked any of this, if it's been informative, like it and share. And most of all, please do subscribe so that more people can see this and add their thoughts, whether they agree or disagree. We're perfectly fine with either one. And Tim, please let me know what it is you're going to be. I know you said earlier you want to take clips of the show. Please let me know which clips you took because I just want to see the context. Folks, I want to thank you. I want you to have a great week. We will be back Sunday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. During the week, we will have more stories going into more depth about what's happening in our world and what you're not being told. This is Michael Voss. I thank you, and I want you to have a great day.